Good to go? All right. Good morning, everybody. We're having a few people that are trying to log on remotely that are having some issues. One of them being Director Knodel, who normally chair this first Planning and Development Committee session. So I will start out chairing it. We'll call the Planning and Development Committee meeting, or actually, Director Taylor, you're here, so in person. I'm going to turn it over to you.
How long are you doing?
I'll call the meeting of the Planning and Development Committee to order at 9 a.m. First up, approval of the agenda. I believe everybody's seen it. Can I have a motion to accept, please? Made, seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Okay, thank you. All right, that's carried. So item 1, RGS review, regional growth strategy review. I'm looking to staff, so I think I look to our CAO, who then looks to, right, CAO.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So the regional growth strategy, again, this is a sub-regional program for us. It's just the Okanagan Valley, so those in the Similkameen not really affected by this. But this has been a multi-year process for us. It's one of our strategic priorities to finish it this year, and I think we're getting close. Mr. Garish keeps confirming that we are. So as we move forward, he's going to bring you up to date on the consultation process that we've gone through, because that's a very important piece of it. But also there are some issues that we need to get further direction on before we can bring this forward for the approval, the regulatory approval process. So we will now turn it over to Mr. Garish, Mr. Chair, and he can take you through it.
Great, thank you. And I'm going to pass over to Fiona Titleys to run through our PowerPoint presentation on this, and then we'll be happy to answer questions at the end.
Thank you. So today we're here to talk again about the Regional Growth Strategy Review. Hopefully you're all getting familiar with it, as you've seen a couple of our presentations at previous P&Ds and at some recent Advisory Planning Commission meetings as well. So we just wanted to take you back and remind you of the original scope of the project when it was first initiated and added to the business plan in 2020. So the original scope was really focused on rural growth areas, and specifically on some of the rural growth areas that had been identified as part of official community plan reviews that we had undertaken since the regional growth strategy was adopted in 2010. And an outcome of these reviews being that certain of the rural growth areas needed to be reviewed for suitability, namely being Willow Beach, Anarchist Mountain, and Greta Ranch. And in addition, the original scope also included updates to the planning context section to include updated census data, and also updates to the climate action section of the bylaw to include new provincial targets for mitigation. However, in June 2nd of last year, we brought forward a proposal to the Planning and Development Committee to expand the scope of the project to a major amendment to address development outside of these primary and rural growth areas, and proposed a new growth management map, as well as an updated housing and development section, in addition to the planning context and climate action and mitigation updates, as was included in the original scope. So last summer, in end of August and beginning of September, we did a public engagement period where we went out to the various areas in the electoral areas, as well in the municipalities, to present this new scope to the public and receive feedback. And then we presented this public feedback to the board at the April 20th Planning and Development Committee meeting, and with our recommendation being to proceed to first reading. However, the board resolution was that this matter be referred to the advisory planning commissions. So throughout June and July, we went out to 5 advisory planning commissions, and I'm just going to summarize what their recommendations were. So first, electoral area CAPC recommended approval subject to appropriate servicing being provided and available for development and subdivision in Gallagher Lake. Area D asked that Lakeshore Highlands be included in the list of examples of rural residential areas in the amendment bylaw, and as well proposed amendments to the wording for a policy related to the development of integrated active transportation networks. Area E and I asked that the village settlement area designation of Naramata and Kaleden, respectively, be replaced with a rural residential area designation. And Area I also recommended that the designation for St. Andrews be rural residential area with the addition of some policy wording from the Area I official community plan, which speaks to development outside of the radio frequency interference area at St. Andrews being supported subject to certain policies also taken from the official community plan. And then lastly, Area F was supportive of the proposed amendments as presented. So based on the public feedback and the recommendations that we heard from the advisory planning commissions, we've now kind of come up with about 4 options for the board to consider today as to how to proceed with this project. So option 1 being proceed with the amendments as currently proposed in the draft bylaw attached to this today's board report, and as I described in the second slide there. So we feel that the amendments as proposed provide clear direction on growth outside of the growth areas, which addresses issues that both staff and the board have encountered over the past decade or so when assessing the consistency of development proposals outside of growth areas with the regional growth strategy. As well, it supports sustainable long-term development by aligning service delivery with land use planning so that services like community water and sewer service are provided to the communities that have the capacity to support these services. However, we do recognize that option 1 does not address some of the feedback that we heard from the public and from the advisory planning commissions. Option 2 would be to, or 2A, sorry, would be to revise the draft bylaw based on feedback from the public and based on the Area E and Area I Advisory Planning Commission recommendations. This option would look like replacing the village settlement area designation, which is currently proposed for Kaleden and Naramata, with an alternative like rural residential area. And this option would also include the updates to the planning context and the climate action section as proposed in the original scope. And just to remind the board, these are the boundaries of the proposed village settlement areas for Kaleden and Naramata, shown in purple, and then the green outside of that is the ALR land. And again, a reminder to the board that the village settlement area supports a limited mix of commercial and institutional uses with generally low density housing types, and water and or sewer servicing may be available in these communities, but it may not yet have been extended to the full extent of the community. And again, just a refresher on the rural residential area designation. This classification describes small lots serviced by community water and or sewer servicing, and new development and rezoning of lands in this category would be limited to proposals that are consistent with the land use designation of the area under the applicable OCP, and where servicing is available to support these proposals. So some pros and cons of this option. So this option does support the APC recommendation and some of the feedback received from the residents of Area E and I. However, as we mentioned, the rural residential area designation is generally not to be serviced with new water and or sewer infrastructure. And while we understand that the public assent process to provide a sewer collection system to parts of Caledon did fail in 2021, the regional district is currently developing a liquid waste management plan for Naramata with a focus on protecting public health and the surrounding environment, and in recognition of it being currently a rural growth area under the regional growth strategy. Redesignating both Naramata and Caledon to rural residential area would impact the provision of public infrastructure to these communities, as priorities for this type of investment would go to the growth areas, and second to that, the resort areas and village settlement areas. Further, the Area E official community plan review is currently underway and has been drafted with the proposed RDS amendments in mind. And as well, the removal of Caledon and Naramata as village settlement areas would leave Gallagher Lake as the sole proposed village settlement area. And we do note that this area is somewhat limited in or maybe limited in its growth capacity due to infrastructure capacity in the area. So moving along to option 2B, this would look like separating the amendment bylaw into two parts or two separate amendments. Amendment 1, kind of going back to that original project scope that I shared on the first slide, just looking at removing those 3 rural growth areas that were identified through those official community plan reviews, and then updating, again, the planning context and climate action sections. And then a second amendment bylaw, which could look to provide more discussion to address the broader question of rural growth areas and development outside of the growth area boundaries. So one positive of this option is it would allow a portion of the project to proceed to completion and would allow a bit more time for a dedicated discussion on rural growth areas. However, it could also further extend the timeline on this project, which has already had quite a lengthy timeline, and this may affect our ability to get started on other board priority projects. Let me go back once to this slide. I'm just highlighting the map on the left. So as opposed to having the more colorful new growth management map that we're proposing, option 2B would look like maintaining the existing growth management map, which is shown on the left here, and simply just deleting those 3 rural growth areas, Willow Beach, Anarchist Mountain, and Greta Ranch from the map, but otherwise keeping this same map. And then the final option for the board to consider would be to abandon the project. And while this would free up staff time to work on other board priorities, significant staff and financial investment has been put into the project to date, and this may be lost if the project is abandoned at this time. And we also wanted to remind the board that under the Local Government Act, we are required to review the RGS consider reviewing the RGS every 5 years. And this next required review year would be 2025, which is not so far away at this point. So in terms of planning for budget and strategic planning, this topic would be coming back fairly soon, which could be viewed as a pro or con in this instance. So up for the board to discuss. And lastly, just to remind you of what the administrative recommendation is, it is to that the amendment bylaw is currently proposed be brought forward for first reading. And as far as next steps and sort of timelines for this project, it really is dependent on the direction that we receive from the board today. If we're going with option one, then our next steps would be to update the municipal councils of this direction and as well our technical advisory committee. And then we should be able to proceed to first reading fairly quickly after that. However, if we go with option 2A or 2B, this may require more time for review and revisions before we're able to bring anything forward. And as well, a reminder to the board that once the whichever amendment bylaw receives first reading, we do have to formally refer it to the municipalities for acceptance, and they must be given a 60-day period, I believe, to accept these amendments before we could then bring it back for further readings. So even once we get it to first reading, there is still a bit of a process after that, just because of the legislated requirements. And we would be happy to answer any questions that the board may have.
Okay, before I get to the questions section, two things. Chris, did you have anything to add to that at this point? No. And then I want to just go to the actual chair and ask the actual chair if they want to, I'm not quite sure what the correct procedure is. Do I hand this off to you, Rick?
No, you might as well finish it off. I've missed enough of it that I'm too far behind.
Okay. All right, I'll take comments, questions. Go ahead, Sabrina. Oh, well, all right. Either one.
Thank you through the chair. Two quick questions. Can you define growth, whether we're looking at population or housing development? And then can you also provide a history on how Caledon and Naramata became rural growth areas under the current RGS?
So generally for growth, okay, thank you. Generally it's population based, although we do try to keep tabs on the number of building permits that have been issued and what those building permits are approving in terms of multifamily versus single detached. That might be a level of detail too fine-grained for an RGS, but I mean, we do certainly look at it when we're doing OCP reviews and other planning projects. And in terms of the history of the RGS and how Caledon and Naramata came to be designated, I mean, obviously that was ultimately a board decision. I think informally I've heard that there were discussions as to, you know, this being a regional bylaw and everybody's in this together and that each electoral area would commit to accommodating a certain amount of growth. And so obviously within the context of a bylaw that you're looking at adopting that's establishing growth areas, then you would be looking at establishing a growth area in each electoral area. And so I'm assuming that's how Caledon and Naramata were chosen. Because, you know, if you look at the bylaw, each electoral area has at least one rural growth area designated. At least that's my recollection, so.
Thank you to staff. Director for Area I.
Thank you. Through the chair. I have a question first to start. So I would like to know how or why Willow Beach, Anarchist, and Greta Ranch were removed from the growth areas.
Staff.
Okay, so it's only a proposal at this point, but it's based on policy direction that came up out of the various OCP reviews that we have done since 2010 when the RGS was adopted. And we didn't have the slide here today, but I know we've used it in previous presentations where I believe the first OCP after RGS adoption was Area D, followed by Area I. We did a Gallagher Lake area plan and then moved into Area F and then Area A. And it was with the Area F OCP that the first policy direction came forward, questioning the suitability of Greta Ranch as a designated growth area. And sure enough, when we went into the Area A review, the same concerns came up with Willow Beach and Anarchist for obvious reasons. I mean, Willow Beach is a floodplain and Anarchist is a very low density rural residential type development. So.
Thank you, staff. Back to the director.
Thank you. So I guess this is just more of a conversation I want to share with the board. So my area I is so diverse, right? I've got Apex, I've got Farley Lake, which is below Apex. I've got Caledon proper. Then I got St. Andrews, which is considered Caledon. I got Twin Lakes, which is considered Caledon. Then I have, Marin Valley. Like I have so many different areas within area I. I also want to remind the board that going through and doing a sewer referendum, it was important that we actually resolve that question. Does the community want sewer? They said very loud that they don't. They're not ready for it. They're no interest in it. We have an irrigation district that provides our water. There's no appetite within the community to convert to the regional district. They do, the community does not want to change. It wants to stay very rural, very rustic. If you want hundreds of people to show up to a meeting, mention streetlights, mentions a sidewalk. The community does not want those sort of services. So listening to my APC, they definitely do not want to stay in the village settlement. The concern from the APC was that proposing staying in a village settlement is almost encouraging what the community is saying it does not want. So following my APC, the feedback I've had from my community, I cannot support anything other than option 2A. And that's simply respecting that we do want to see changes in the OCP to reflect what is happening at St. Andrews, and that the community wants to stay small and stay where it's at. And they do understand the consequences of not expanding homes, which would limit the tax base in the future. We've had a lot of conversations, and that's definitely, they understand that. So that's where I'm at with the review, and I hope that everybody considers, what each community wants. And I know that when we look at growth, we look at the entire region, and we want to see more improvements in different areas. But I think that when we have a little satellite community that's saying we don't want more, I think we need to hear that, and we need to listen. So the fact that other communities can be pulled out, and my area is asking for the same thing, I think that needs to be heard.
Thank you, Director Monteith. Any other, Mayor Summerland.
Yeah, thank you. Just a question. So option 2A, why is the climate action policies, why would they have to be revised if we went with the 2A? I don't quite understand the connection there.
To staff?
So when we wrote the report, I think we did include that as an option, as that had been part of that option that we had included for the board when we presented to you at the April 20th Planning and Development Committee meeting, because as part of the public feedback that we received, we heard kind of both ends of the spectrum on this section, with some community members feeling that the policies that we had updated were they should be doing more. Our targets should be more aggressive, and then other members of the public saying that the entire section should be deleted and we shouldn't be including any climate action policies at all. So just based on that feedback, we had included that as an option, but we didn't hear any feedback from the advisory planning commissions about wanting to make any changes to this section. So the board could choose not to revise that section any further if you'd like.
Okay.
Back to Director Holmes.
Yeah, so to follow up, so there's no connection to the designation of Naramata or Caledon. So really they're two separate things.
Yes.
Right? Okay.
Okay, second director, I've got all these issues here. Second director from Summerland.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Question through to staff, if I may. Can you give me any context whatsoever, like being kind of relatively new here, why Greta Ranch has been eliminated?
To staff?
Well, I think from a broader perspective, it's this underlying question I think has kind of animated this whole review, which is what is a rural growth area? What does growth in a rural electoral area look like? And when we designate these communities, is it simply a reflection of the fact that they might have had zoning as Greta did that currently allows for 300 to 400 units? Or are we saying because this is a growth strategy and it's a long-term plan that we're envisioning these communities to grow beyond whatever the existing zoning is. So we see Greta going to 800 or maybe 1,200 units, right? And I do think also for consideration of Greta was the provision of infrastructure. And, whether Summerland is still prepared to extend a sewer line out to service not only Greta, but the property between it and the campground, and also the campground as well. And if that's not happening, then that does obviously limit the potential as a rural growth area for Greta.
Further questions? Director, Area F? E, sorry.
Thank you to the chair. I think with the village settlement area, some of the language that's being proposed is where there was pushback and pull from communities, because in a bottom paragraph outlining what it is, there's support community sewer systems, but then to support a range of housing types, great. But then it goes on to suggest duplexes and small scale townhouse and apartment buildings. When you add that language for a rural area, bluntly, it's terrifying. It's not the type of housing that they want to see in those communities. And then it goes on, the objective is to focus provision of limited housing service and amenities. So I think and then just supporting policies, establish higher densities. So I think the village settlement section just needs to be teased out a little bit to be a little more consistent in its language and what you're trying to achieve there. So echoing what Director Monteith said about our rural areas, they gravitated to the rural residential section and can resonate with that a little bit better, because they don't want to see these types of densities in our rural areas. So that's why I asked where population is. The population in Naramata hasn't changed in 20 years. It's gone up 0.06%. Our housing goes up 5.6%. So that's where asking for population, you're looking at people versus housing, then being a growth area based on people, we'd be more rural residential. We're not bringing in full-time residents that want to live in our community. So that's where I do support that Area E moves under rural residential until we can tease out village settlement a little bit better. That resonates, I think, with where planning wants to go with it and what resonates better with residents that live in those areas.
I'm not sure if there was a question there. Does staff want to respond to any of that nonetheless? No? Okay. Further questions, Director Holmes?
I have a question for directors from I and E, I guess. Yep, it is. I understand, when you say people don't want to change, but the reality is change happens whether you want it or not. And so if you say you don't want to change, my concern would be, are the people in your community prepared to lose their school? Because really, I think what this designation kind of means is that you can at least keep what you've got. And I understand that, I understand why that village settlement area designation came about. It's looking at where the services and infrastructure are currently in place in the region, and those are the two places. I don't understand why Gallagher Lake is designated as a village settlement area, but maybe Director Knodel can inform us on that. But to me, it's all about what kind of community do you want your community to be? And if you want it to be a rural community, that's fine. But are you prepared to lose what you've got? And I think that's a real risk, and that's what people need to ask themselves. So.
Okay, I think there was sort of invitation to directors Monteith or Fedrigo. Director Monteith.
And through the chair, how do I say this? So we have tried being in a growth area. The community does not want growth. And Director Frigo said, when we talk about duplexes, If somebody proposed a duplex in Caledon, I don't know what will happen. Like, it just doesn't, the community does not want that sort of density. Area I was one of the first, if not the first, that allowed secondary dwellings, right? Like, we wanted that. We do support density. We do support wanting that secondary dwelling. So it's not that the community's scared of adding more homes, which would accommodate building more for families, for keeping our school viable. But the problem is that we don't want the style of housing that's being proposed. And that's the challenge. We are right on the water, right? The community has housing right along the waterfront. If all of a sudden we had a row of townhouses, that will impact water quality for the entire region with no septic system, with being on a septic system, with only having irrigation district for water, with no grants to improve our water system. We're at a point where the irrigation district is saying they cannot sustain adding more hookups. They can't. They're at their end. They need to do all their upgrades. And I'm sure a small district like Summerland can understand the tug and the pull with infrastructure. They're saying they cannot support more. By keeping us in a village settlement, we're giving the illusion that we support more when the community doesn't, and it's not ready for more. In the future, maybe it is. Maybe it goes back in. But at this time, they've said no to sewer, and they do not have the infrastructure for water. Definitely, we're rural. We're not a settlement.
All right, thank you, Director Monteith. I'll look to Director Federico, and then I'm also conscious of time, and we're going to have to make a decision as to how we move on this, whether it's forward or hold or what.
Perfect. Thank you
So,
through the
Director
chair.
Federico.
Thank you through the chair. So where do I start with this? I mean, the school closing is always, going to be a concern, but the movement of population in our community, we have younger families that are still moving into our community. They're there. Is our school going to hit population that it was before? Likely not. But the majority, at least it feels, that are buying homes are for second homes or for vacation rentals. So unless there's data, which again, we don't have economic development to prove otherwise, right now the feeling is that it's mostly just either seniors or an income property. And so if we're going again by population, it's proven that we're not a growth area because our population hasn't exploded in 20 years. If we were a growth area, our population, everybody would be like, we want to move to Naramata, we want to live there full time. They've got a great school, they've got all these resources. We're not seeing that. All we're seeing is more housing being built to be a second or summer home that is being used as a vacation rental. So we want to stay, rural residential. We're not saying that. We are not happy to see some others. If it fits on a parcel, we're just not putting it out there that we're open for that growth.
Thanks, Director Federico. I've got Director Coyne, and then last word to Director Guttins.
Yeah, I guess my question is to Chris. With the province bringing out new legislation to do away with single family zoning, how is this going to play into all this? Because I don't know if we should even be really discussing this until we know what the legislation is going to look like on how we have to move forward, because the province is proposing no more single family and up to 4 plexes on single family lots. So that's going to change everything that we do. You got any comments on that?
To Mr. Garsh.
The only comment I would add is, we're aware of the province's priority on facilitating housing development, and also that they're looking at municipalities and how they can try to help facilitate housing development. I think the electoral areas, however, fall into a different realm. And again, it gets back to this whole issue of infrastructure and growth and the two being tied together. And, for the most part, with the exception of the the village settlement areas, if we're talking about those, the absence of community sewer in a lot of our communities impacts our ability under the current provincial regulations to facilitate that kind of housing development. So we're aware of the interest of the province, but there's particular challenges in the electoral areas with servicing that I think prevents us from, meaningfully contributing to that housing development in the absence of water and sewer upgrades and systems and whatnot.
Thanks, Mr. Garsh. Director Gevins.
Thanks, and I'm aware we're running out of time. I actually was just going to say something very similar to what Mr. Garish has shared around the infrastructure. And, you know, in Greater West Bench, you all know that we don't have the proper infrastructure. And I would say when we did the OCP, it was a pretty 50-50 split between staying rural and maybe looking into having a bit more growth up there. I think that has changed somewhat since 2018. I think the affordability and people needing to have more than one person on a property. But when you have a little area like that, you know, with a couple thousand people in it to go and build a wastewater treatment and infrastructure, that we need help, and we need help from the province. And I just recognize that our MLA is there and we're talking about provincial legislation, but where does West Bench go? Even if we all wanted it, could we ever afford it? And that becomes a real struggle. And what I think about this plan is that we actually don't have to have any rural growth areas as far as I understand. But if we're looking at this plan to be a 30, 40-year plan, we need to start thinking about where we are going to start investing these dollars. So in 30, 40 years' time, whoever's sitting around this table isn't having the same concerns that they don't have the right infrastructure in place. So I think that's the plan, is the long game and not really so immediate. So I think there's more discussion that's warranted on this because we need to broaden our scope a little bit.
Okay, recognizing that you're affected, Director Monteith, I'd like one last comment, and then I'd invite a motion either to move forward or table.
And thank you through the chair. I would like to make a motion. So I would like to make the recommendation of option number 2A, please.
Okay, we have a motion made. Is there a seconder? Director Federico. Okay, discussion. Comments? Director Holmes.
Just wondering if you'd make a friendly amendment to remove the revised climate action policies portion of that motion.
Okay, so I think we can accept that. Is that correct? Okay. Director Conants.
Yes, on the subject, I actually raised my hand a little earlier, but I know it's difficult to see all of us. I just think in future discussions like this that are so important to the future of our region, that maybe we could have posted on the walls around in the meeting room our strategic priorities that we all agreed on 6 months ago or 7 months ago, and just so that we can refer to them. And I know that housing was something that was one of the most important priorities for all directors. And I just direct this to maybe our CAO to get our strategic priorities up so that we can see them and refer to them when we're having these discussions. Thanks.
Thank you, Director Conants. Further comments or questions? Okay, Director Conants, is your hand up? No. You've asked your question. Director Roberts.
There you go. Thank you. I think I'm somehow down on the bottom of your screen. I've been kind of waving for a while. I have a question, and it's in regards to staff, and I wanted to answer it before because, again, our area is not a part of the RGS, and being new to having an OCP, my understanding is the RGS, and I think was similarly said by someone else earlier, is the big picture long term, but is not your OCP kind of where you get down and dirty in regards to certain community things? Like, for instance, if you don't want to have that particular apartment building or that, because the RGS, you're stating more about infrastructure, you're just saying that down the road, if the community does change, this is the places where you'd put in that infrastructure that may allow those kinds of residential situations that the community doesn't want now, and that is in their OCP that they don't want now, but that could change at a later date. Do I have that correct? Thank you.
Mr. Garish?
Yes, you guys are correct.
Okay.
Thank you. Just a follow-up. So then,
go ahead, Director Roberts.
yeah, so for me, it just makes sense then. I probably wouldn't vote. I would go with the staff recommendation, just because, again, it's long-term, it's oversight, but the work that's done, at our director's level and controlling the small communities, the hamlets, even a cul-de-sac, we have the opportunity to deal with the flavor and the issues that people want to see in the moment with our OCP adaptions. So that's where I stand. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Question, Director Gettens.
Yeah, thanks. Just to confirm, then I think from the presentation, we heard this is coming back in 2025. Is that correct?
Yes, we'll come back and ask the board if it wishes to consider reviewing the RGS again, and it's a 5-year cycle that we have to ask that question.
Just as a follow-up, I do think we've had a lot of staff time put onto this, and I know that there's other priorities that need to get done that might be more pressing. So with that in mind, I'm fine to go with the motion that's on the floor, but I do think, and I actually do like your idea, Director Canens, about having a reminder of what we're doing here, and again, for the future of where we're going to go and put our housing and how we're going to make that actually happen in the next decades to come. I don't know if we have enough time in this meeting to have that discussion, but I think we need to have more time for that longer strategic plan. But just to give staff the time they need, I think we should I'm going to go with the motion, hopefully be able to park it until 2025, and then we'll take another look at it.
Any comment from staff? No? Okay, any further comments? Okay, I'll call the question. All those in favor of the motion, which is 2A. You got that, Christy? Anyone opposed? Okay, so staff tells me that motion is passed. Okay, so I think we're looking for a motion to adjourn then. Okay, I've got Marty and James. Thank you. And thank you.
All right, we move over to environment and infrastructure. I'll get that right yet. We go to Director Gettens to chair this one. Please, go ahead.
Thanks, Chair. I'll call the meeting to order at 9:41, and I'll just look for a motion to accept the agenda. First and second, thank you, and the motion carries. Oh, sorry, asking that. All in favor? Anyone opposed to the agenda? Thank you. Okay, we've got a delegate today as well, so CAO, I'll go over to you for introductions.
Thanks, Madam Chair. We have had Ministry of Transportation Infrastructure attend fairly regularly over the past couple of years, and we always have lots of questions for them. And I understand that we did ask for questions in advance. So we have Eric Lackmuth, who's the district manager for our region, in attendance electronically. And I should also introduce our MLA from Penticton North, who is going to be sitting in with us. And we've invited MLA Ashton to sit up at the delegate table if he had questions or if you had questions for him. But we did want to bring in Mr. Lackmuth, and he can, I believe he'll probably just respond on questions, but he may have an update as well. So we'll ask Mr. Francisco to just put him on the screen for us.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Just checking to see if you can hear my mic and see me on the screen there.
Yep, we can now, Eric. Thanks. Welcome, and thanks for coming. I think you've got the questions like what the CAO just said, so I'll just let you go through them, and then I'll keep an eye on the boardroom to see if there are any questions.
That sounds good.
Okay,
so I got them in a couple of waves here. So the first round of questions there started with, first one was wanting to know our policy around danger trees along highways, who's responsible for dealing with them, and how often are assessments done for danger trees along the highways. So danger trees are part of our maintenance specifications with the maintenance contractors. So they have routine responsibilities for removing any fallen danger trees immediately. So those are those that are impacting actual travel lanes of the road. But we also have our general quantified plan, which is used for planning all of our maintenance and rehabilitation works for all activities. And danger trees are just one component of that. So that's where we're proactively looking to remove trees that look like they're imminent threats to either structures, users, or the public in general that are originating from roadways there. So obviously there's limited funds with that. and with 10,000 lane kilometers of road, there's a lot of trees out there, as you can imagine, within our right of way. So we do need to prioritize the ones that look like they're the higher risk. But that's how we go about assessing them. Our staff members, we get them training for danger tree assessment as well, but sometimes we need to bring in specialists for certain groups. So,
Okay, I've got a follow-up question with that. A couple of them actually. Director Van Alpen.
Thank you, through the chair. Just a quick question, if I may, then danger trees is one situation. What about invasive species?
Over to you, Eric. Invasive species.
Yeah, we have an invasive species group that's based out of Kamloops. So it doesn't fall under our district purview, but we do coordinate with them. So easiest way would be if you have some interest in their program and priorities, would be to get you in contact with that group based out of Kamloops.
I think I'm seeing some nods. I think there's some interest in getting connected with that group out of Kamloops.
That would be a huge help if you could forward that information to the board. There's some real serious issues in Trout Creek and all along the highway to Penticton, and it's being a lot of the orchards are being impacted by these, I think it's Chinese elm beetles.
Yeah.
And then there's the Russian olives all the way to Penticton, and they're just multiplying as faster than, obviously they're not doing any maintenance on them. So anyway, just thought I'd bring it to your attention. If you could forward that number, that'd be great. I'd be grateful. Thank you.
Thanks, Director. Another question for you, Eric, from Director Taylor in OK Falls.
Yeah, if we could have is it possible, conceivable that we could have direct access to the danger tree crew and we can just refer our residents to them? Or who do you want us to refer them to on danger trees?
Any concerns on danger trees, just go to our general office line at 250-712-3660. That's our kind of head district office in Kelowna, and depending on where the concern is, it'll be forwarded to the appropriate staff member for assessment.
Great. Thanks, Eric. Okay, I think we're good to go to the next question.
I see Director Roberts, maybe.
Oh, sorry, Director Roberts.
Getting used to it. I must be somewhere down there at the bottom of the screen. Sorry, Eric, I just want to, my question kind of straddles both, because I was kind of looking at the dangerous tree item and I thought it would cover it. And then of course, when someone brought up about the invasive species, I kind of went, oh, does it kind of tie into that? It is the Russian elm, because I'm seeing even the struggle with the very few times that you see our contractors out mowing. They're struggling with this tree that's on the, all the way along, especially in my area, in Area G. Like, they're no longer shrubs; they're full trees that even the mower can't cut. So when does that start as, like, here it is, an invasive shrub that you're getting in the mowing or whatever with the different group? Or when does it become a danger, when it's got so big the machinery can't even cut it down and it's going underneath and into the pull up the asphalt? So I was trying to, is that something that I would carry on with, like, the other directors in regards to the invasive issues, or is that considered dangerous?
Yeah.
Thanks, Director. Go ahead, Eric.
Yeah, I would err on the side of, if there's a safety concern at all, then to go through our district. And then we'll determine if there's something that we need to do immediately, or whether it's something that should just go to the invasive group for kind of regular programming of their function there.
Okay. Thanks, Eric. And I'm just going to remind the board, we've got about 17 minutes and a number of questions. So Eric, do you want to move on to the next question from Director Federico around the lower portion of Gulch Road in Naramata?
Yeah, absolutely. I did reach out to Director Federico, and we kind of have some plans for when our new operations manager starts next Tuesday. Hooray!
Okay.
Replacing Jeff Wiseman, who retired months ago. So a lot of items have kind of been backlogged while waiting for staff to come in. We've also have our road area manager who looks after a good chunk of the RDOS's area, replacing Chris Keir. Expected to arrive in September. We don't have an exact date yet, but soon. So
Okay.
yeah, that one will be on that list.
Great, thanks, Eric.
Next, we've got just preference for dealing with resident concerns, kind of to do with maintenance and AIM. So that goes back to that same phone number that I provided, the 712-3660. That's our ministry office line. So it'll be forwarded to the appropriate ministry staff member so that we can follow up on any maintenance concerns, assuming it isn't something very simple that they just want to reach out to AIM for directly.
Okay, thanks.
So I also have Director Holmes had a question about the Summerland slide, when it was going to be done. So that was probably put in before we wrapped that up and delays. So good, always nice to have a good news story to get something finished up there. There is a potential for further study work and follow-up at the site that we need to have some discussions with our geotech folks with. But for now, that one is wrapped up and we're open to normal traffic. Sorry, just scrolling my other screen. I have also a question there around District of Summerland's request for compensation for detour damage to local roads. So I've reached out, tried to reach Joe, who was on vacation, but Sean Goodsell reached back out to me, provided me a list of the roads and areas he was concerned with. So we're working through that together.
Thanks.
I'll jump over to Gallagher Lake bus stop. That one essentially is waiting for our replacement staff, starting with our operations manager that's coming next week. So it's going to be something to discuss a little bit, is to find out priorities from the board as this person comes back online, what we want them to be focusing on, because we have our own kind of internal prioritization that we'll do, but any feedback from the board on what your priorities are and want to focus on would be helpful, because there's just going to be a backlog and a large number of items. So some communication around that would be helpful, and maybe if we can finish off today, kind of knowing who to reach out to get that kind of list of priorities and have that discussion would be helpful.
Thanks, Eric. I just see Director Cannoli, you got your hand up.
Yes, and thank you. Just to let you know, Eric, we have somewhere in excess of 600 residents, most seniors in that area, that could greatly benefit by that project going ahead quickly. And on another note, kudos to your people for getting the signage up. Quite a bit of signage has been done in our area and it looks good. Thank you very much, sir.
Great, thanks, Director.
Speaking of signage, had so that request there for the bicycle signage, the widening of and that. So yeah, thank you for that note. Much appreciated. I think the next question. So I did receive a number of items from Director Taylor as well. And while unfortunately just getting them yesterday didn't have a time to prepare that, I did have a good discussion with Director Taylor on how best we can kind of tackle that. So we're planning a site visit with our new operations manager, Director Taylor, to go look at a number of the items that included some safety, potential safety concerns, as well as drainage items, which are always best kind of looked at in person to see where we can go from there. So
Great.
I think we've got a date set up, if I recall, near the end of the month when the Director Taylor's back from vacation, where we're going to meet up, and that'll give a couple weeks for our new ops manager to get their feet under them. Anybody that is curious, our new ops manager is Bailey Chamberlain, who comes to us over from AIM Roads, and is very familiar with the work in the area, but just needs to kind of learn the ministry perspective on things and do that.
Well, I'll say that's great news. I really like working with Bailey, so that's fantastic. I'm glad to hear that. I see there's a question from Director Bush. Go ahead.
I don't have a question, but, well, I mean, maybe it is a question, but in the Smelkameen, so not just Area B, but G and Lower Smelkameen, the road maintenance is just absolutely horrible. And might not be danger trees, but definitely nuisance trees. They're just growing up everywhere. And I know they can, if and when they get around to it, they can mow a meter, but a meter does nothing for the nuisance trees. It's getting ridiculous, and I could show you picture after picture after picture of roads. It's really embarrassing, and I don't understand why we have to be the ones to complain. I believe you have people working for the ministry. They're the ones that should be out making these people do stuff, and I just don't understand why it's got so bad. Thank you.
Thanks. Eric? Any comments?
Without really knowing the nuisance trees that you're talking about, if they're beyond a meter past the road, it's not certain that there is maintenance requirements in our maintenance contract. So I have to see it and look at that to know with our staff. But we can follow up if you have some specific areas of concern.
Okay, thanks, Eric. I see Director Roberts. Go ahead.
I believe like this is in relation to the Russian elm, and it grows up right next to the asphalt on the sides of the road, but it also encompasses as it spreads out. There's places, I've got a place down by on the west side of Karamias where they just left them because the machines hit these bushes that are turning into trees, and they're not cutting them, and they're just getting banged around. I have one right next to my house. I live right on Highway 3, and because I'm injured, I can't deal with it. But otherwise, I have to go out, cut trees down that are in the right of way of the highway. And it is something that we brought up the last time. It's where my question came about what is considered danger, what is considered invasive, because again, their root systems are also going under and dealing with the asphalt itself. And then the bush end of it is creating a visual hazard.
Yeah, maybe I can elaborate a bit more on our prioritization when we look at danger trees. So first priority would be something that can fall and hit either an individual or a vehicle. That would be the top priority for safety. Second would be something that might be at risk of damaging either a private structure or our public infrastructure. So that would be, a root system that would be affecting our road, or something that could fall and maybe drop on somebody's shed on private land. And then kind of third priority would be sight distance issues, where there could be a deer hiding behind some bushes and wanting to improve sight distances in that respect. So and then kind of on from there, if it's just aesthetic, to be honest, there's no funding to really deal with that. Probably won't get done at all. So we do need to balance the funds we have, because we could spend our entire road budget just trying to clear brush and mowing, but that wouldn't do anybody any good. So we need to focus on what is the priority for us and for the public.
Thanks, Eric. Dr. Taylor?
Yeah, just sort of setting aside some of these operational issues. I think there's a feeling in my community, and when I've talked to some other directors, I think I'm not alone, almost feel like we're a big part of the front desk for Modi in terms of receiving a lot of complaints or concerns and prioritizing them and bringing them up to Modi or the MLA. And I'm just struggling. I'm not sure that that's the right way of doing it. I mean, somehow it feels like your customer doesn't know how to reach you. And I may be dead wrong on this, and maybe we're only getting 2% of the concerns, but it feels like we're getting more than our share. And again, I may be speaking only for myself. I do think that the site visits that you've mentioned is a great thing. I think that'll be very productive. I think this session is very useful, productive. We should definitely make a point of having them on a regular basis, and presumably they are, but I'd really like to know that we're not the front counter. And I'll leave it there.
Yeah, I would say I don't think you're wrong, and it's really, it comes down to the regional districts' policies. We have several other regional districts in our area that are, let's say, maybe less engaged and involved in taking the road concerns of the constituents to us. And in those areas, those folks find us. They reach out to us directly. And basically, the more that you try to get engaged to make it happen, and especially if, oh, hey, the ministry came and met with the regional, the area director and got these things solved, they're going to want to go to you again, right? Whereas they probably just won't even try us. And I would say that in other areas we are successful when people reach out to us directly. We don't ignore folks. We'll deal with them. But if they don't want to reach out to us directly, either through habit or the assistance being offered elsewhere, then they'll never try to find us and reach out to us directly, because they work with you on a lot of other issues. So they just kind of assume that you are going to help them with anything. So a lot of regional districts simply take the approach of, roads aren't our jurisdiction. We don't look after them. Sounds like this is a road concern. So here's the number for the ministry. Here's the local contact, and they'll assist you in this. And oftentimes that'll be enough. There's a rare occasion where maybe somebody will feel like, hey, I'm not getting the answer that I want, and they'll go back to an elected official, and then we work through those. But it will reduce significantly the amount of people that are reaching out to you directly. So it's food for thought, and you're definitely right that this regional district is far more engaged in those types of activities than a lot of others.
Thanks, Eric. I think that's why it's great that we have our MLA here too. I think both MLAs were invited just to hear it, because it is a provincial matter, and I think it can be confusing to citizens. I do also know, though, that when elected directors get involved, you do get sometimes some better response. And recently with yourself and Kennedy coming to West Bench and the emails we got, so thank you for moving some of those things forward. It is helpful. And sometimes these little rural communities need an advocate to help them navigate the system. And a lot of us think that's part of our job as well. Are there any other comments or questions? I'm just going around the board table. I don't see, I see one from Director Coyne Sr. and another from Director Roberts. So Director Coyne, then Director Roberts, then Director Federico. Okay, Director Roberts. Go ahead, Director Roberts, or Director Coyne, sorry. Who's going, sorry.
You're just trying to make me feel good.
All right, Director Roberts. No?
Okay,
Director
now,
Coyne?
there you go. All right. So it is for Director Roberts. I'm just making sure. To Eric, I just want to say thank you. I did reach out, and I know there was a little bit of fear from AIM sometimes with a concern if it all of a sudden opens the door that there might be more work entitled to it. So, but for instance, in Olalla, we had a long-standing issue with emergency services and being able to access homes, because a lot of times the people in ambulances and fire apparatus and police aren't necessarily from the area. And we had 2 frontage roads in Olalla, and now we've got frontage south and frontage north, and we really appreciate that because it makes it a lot easier to access these homes. It was hard to understand where they were when it was coming up on our emergency vehicle CADs as Highway 3A, but there was no access point. So really appreciate those signs going up, and you also put a couple warning signs of some roads that were becoming problematic. And again, I just like to say I really appreciate that. And I do direct people to call our local manager. And I know our local manager in the last little while, due to there not being an ops manager, was very busy. And I made sure that she knew that I understood that as well. So again, thank you.
Thanks, Director Roberts. So I'll go to Director Coyne. Just a reminder that we are, excuse me, we're out of time as well. So Director Coyne.
I'll just pass and deal with it later. Thank you.
Thanks, Director. Director Federico.
Yeah, thank you, to the Chair. I just want to mention a big thank you. I've gotten some compliments from residents recently that they've either phoned the ministry or they've phoned AIM, and their concerns have been dealt with in a timely manner. So I just wanted to express a thank you from myself and from our residents.
Okay, thank you, Director Holmes.
Thank you. Last week or 2 weeks ago, I met with the management of the Federal Research Center in Summerland, the Agricultural Research Center. And they asked if they could if we could help in respect to the intersection on Green Lake Road. That's the road that goes up to the research center, and also on the other side to Sunoka Beach Park, Provincial Park. And now I know that their issue with that intersection is they basically, when they're coming out of it, turning left north towards Summerland, they can't get across. And so what all the staff do there is turn right and go down to the Pyramid picnic site and loop back and come back that way. So I know statistically that intersection isn't a high accident intersection, but I'm wondering, when you're looking at things like installing lights or intersection control, do you consider these kind of hassle factors? What people have to do in order to avoid an accident? And I think the other direction, coming out of Sunoka, trying to head south into Penticton from Sunoka, it's the same thing. People have a really hard time. So I'm just wondering what goes in when you're looking at intersections and how to improve safety at intersections. Is it only the statistics of accidents that you look at, or do you look at these other kind of bigger picture?
Yeah, good question. And actually, I was just talking to one of our traffic engineers about that intersection yesterday, and he is working to get somebody that's local assigned to have a look at that with our district, just to see if there's any ideas that they have around it. But to get back to kind of that general sense, we do primarily focus on safety, which means the statistics, kind of rule more than anything, but also congestion is a big one. So that one is tricky because it's not a super high volume, and it's not there's not a lot of accidents that are happening there compared to other priorities. So it's a difficult one to get funding for, to be honest, because if you can spend $1 million and save several lives, or you can spend $1 million and make it more convenient for people, I think most people would agree that you got to focus on where it's going to save lives. But that doesn't mean that we don't want to look at it to see if there's maybe some smaller improvements or interim methodology that we can use. We had a good discussion about the fact that, hey, there's a speed transition occurring there. Certainly enforcement to get people a consistent speed so that people know, if a gap is really a gap, if somebody's traveling 100 kilometers an hour, or are they actually traveling 70 and doing that. So just trying to get some of our engineering folks involved to see if they can wrap their head around it and provide any suggestions. So that is in motion.
Great. All right. Thanks very much, Eric. Taking a last look. I think we are good. Thank you for your time. We do appreciate you coming in and answering these questions. Thanks very much.
One quick plug from me just to update you. So I take the chances. We are moving forward with medium barrier installation for Callan to Greta in that segment there, which is the 4-lane. So current plan right now, it just was the tender is just going through right now, but it looks like probably fall construction and putting down the barrier, with a chance to be early next spring. So I just wanted to make sure you were aware of that for folks. I know the medium barrier has been a great improvement for safety and well liked by the vast majority of people, but there are always people that are impacted by access that might be concerned, and we've been working with those people individually throughout the project. So just wanted to give a heads up about that before you see any work happen.
Great. Thanks, Eric. Last word, Director Holmes.
Yeah, just a final, Eric, if you could pass on to all the appropriate people, a thank you for all the work that done for the slide. It was, I kind of was watching that progress every single day for however many weeks, and it was an incredible amount of work that went into that. Those blasts became a little tourist attraction, and it's an incredible amount of cleanup work. And so just pass on your thanks to everybody.
Thanks, Director Holmes.
Thanks.
Okay,
I'll do that. And just a quick plug, thanks very much to the District of Summerland too for all of your great work in partnering with us on that, and knowing that even though we were listing detour routes to go around the major highways, the local folks were coming in, and it took us a little bit to get coordinated with all the emergency work going on, but I really appreciate all the collaboration from the District of Summerland on that, so thank you.
Okay, the second final word, Director Bush, and then I'm adjourning. So Director Bush.
So this is for MLA Ashton. I'm just wondering, like with all the trouble on Highway 97 and whatnot, if there's any considerations of putting a road from Penticton to Kelowna, which would require no bridge.
MLA, we've got plenty of time now.
Director Bush, thank you. I have had discussions with the previous manager of Penticton about this is the only area in the entire valley where there isn't secondary access without going far afield. Hopefully it'll continue to be discussed about the 201 and just a bit of signage and a bit of grader work to ensure safe progress when the highway is closed down. But that'll be an ongoing discussion with Eric and the crew. So.
Great. Thank you, everybody. Okay, can I get a motion to adjourn this meeting, please? It's 10:10. Thank you. Any opposed? Excellent. Over to you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. We move straight into the Corporate Services Committee meeting. So looking for a motion to approve the agenda. Moved, seconded. Thank you. All in favor? Great. Any opposed? Motion carries. First item on the agenda happens to be a closed session, and that in accordance with section 90, I got to put my glasses on to make sure I read this right, 91C of the Community Charter, the board closed the meeting to the public on the basis of labor relations and other employee relations. So looking for a motion to go in camera. Moved, seconded, thank you. All those in favor? Great. Any opposed? Motion carries. So we'll give a half a minute here for people to exit and Danny to get us into closed.
And could I just ask who the board committee wants in camera, Mr. Chair? This will be Ms. Morgan and Mr. Safino presentation, but did you want anybody else in?
Go ahead, Director Bloomfield.
Before we discuss that, I'm going to object to the agenda at the moment simply because the closed agenda was sent to me. It went into my spam mail. I'm not the only person to have this problem. I know that other directors have had this problem here today, and I've just been checking with them, and I have not had a chance. I've only just found the agenda, and I have not had a chance to consider it. So I'm not saying I'm against the content. I just haven't had a chance to review it and consider it, and so I'd be looking for an immediate deferral to the next meeting, if that, I know.
Well, let's see where it goes, and if you're on, as it progresses. I don't believe we need anybody at this stage other than the two that are going to present. So if we can have Ms. Morgan and
I think Ms. Mullen's trying to find them.
They're probably online, are they not, or were they coming in? There they be. Yeah. Tim's PowerPoint while you're at it, Danny, and then. We good to go? All right. So this is the pre-budget workshop. Do you want to start us off, CAO?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So back in our budget committee earlier this year, when we were going through the 2023 budget estimates, There was a suggestion that we should meet earlier in the year prior to us getting into the administrative procedure, which we're about to start, and have a discussion at the committee level as to issues that committee may want to see with changes to our process, how we present, the types of information that you're interested in, issues that you see as far as how we're presenting the estimates, and then we can proceed into the administrative protocol based on that information. So Mr. Sfino has got a slide deck that he's going to take you through, and what we're looking for though really is your input into the budget process so that we can get started for 2024.
Okay, over to you, Mr. Safino.
I couldn't have said it any better. So the objective is, as the CEO stated, is for staff, senior managers to listen to what you want, what we have been doing, evaluate what we've been doing. I've made quite a few changes in the last 3 years. This will be the 4th budget I've done. We'd like to hear how that's going. The PowerPoint presentation is very short, and I just want, yes, I can do short PowerPoint presentations. So let's start off with, this is your budget. This one here was 1,074 pages. I've had a lot of talk about this as why is it so much? It's to be transparent. It's to give you information. It is 26 schedules with the F schedules breaking it down so it's to your specific area. If you like, you can look at everything. If you don't, you just look at your area. So essentially, it's this pyramid where the second from the top is the F schedules, which is, and there's 16 because PIDs are also included, so they get their own schedule. But those that want to see everything, they would go to the schedules D and E. Those that want to see just their own area, they would go to Schedule F. The very top, which is C, is the bottom line. What is the tax requisition for your area? And it also includes the tax hits for various assessments. So as was stated, the objectives of the workshop is to evaluate the information provided in the current budget, discuss the 3 new forms that you've seen now for 3 years. And before I go any further, if there's any questions, stop me. And this, because there's not very many, but we're here to listen to you. What additional information or forms would you like that would help you make your decision and give you the opportunity to say yes or no to the budget? Objectives continue to improve controls, which will add consistency. That's one thing that I've had a lot of questions on. Sometimes there isn't a consistency, but there's a reason, and you should know why. To provide the consistency for a 5-year budget. So by that I mean, when you authorize a budget for 2023, you're authorizing it for 4 additional years, and so for 2023, you've technically authorized the 2024 budget. That 2024 budget, unless there's some major issues, should be fairly close to what the budget that you authorized in 23. So one of the new controls, information that I'm requesting, and this is up to the board if you wish to have it, because it's going to be work for the senior managers, is if there's an increase in the 2024 budget that you're going to approve for 2024 that was provided in 2023, I'm asking the managers to provide a reason. And that way you can see why it's above the 5%. I'm using 5 because the CPI last year was 6.9. I don't anticipate it to be that high again, but it's safe just in case something happens. So with that new requirement, this is the form that they're required to fill out. They will tell you the description of the service, the line item budgeted last year, the revised line item if it's over 5%, and why. So this is something new that, and now I don't know if previously the manager finances have provided it. This is the tax requisition as it would appear if there's no changes in the budget that the board authorized in 2023 for 2024. So it shows the 2023 budget, and it shows what it would be if the board authorizes it without anything. And this is something new, and I think it's helpful, but that's something I would like you to also let me know. Because along with this, if the board thinks this is useful, I could also do this right up until 2028. I would have to extrapolate and guesstimate what the assessments go, so that would make it closer. But just so that no one thinks that this is going to be the bottom one, it could change because you are the board and you control it. So this is something that staff goals, and this is something I hear from what the board says, to allow the board to easily identify all additional operational costs which will result in authorizing full-time equivalent. So the directors will see the implications, the hits for any request for FTEs. You are currently getting it. Do you need more information? Is this enough that is provided? To have the 5-year capital budget list and the 5-year operational budget and continue to have them separate, I think it's beneficial that they continue to be separate. For capital projects, funding source must be identified. So they are identified currently. If it's recognized that the capital project doesn't have enough funds in the reserve, you'll see the word borrowing. And that has an implication in that there would be a debt servicing on the operational side if the board authorizes that. And that's something that I want to make sure that it's identified to you. And I want to highlight it in yellow so that you can see that there's implications. This is the only slide that's this small, Bill. All the rest are, one of the complaints that I got is that some slides are small, but this is the one, this one here, there's a new tool that has been working in the background that's finally fully operational. When a manager asks for requests for capital, this tool, we go to this tool, we enter it into the system. It tells us, yes, you have enough money. No, you don't have enough money. And there's other files that we go to, and it says, this is the 5-year impact based on your 5-year request. So we can go to a manager and say, based on your asks in year 3 or year 4, you don't have enough money, and it goes to borrowing. And that's something that I would like to add to the budget. Yet it'd be another schedule, but that's something that you as a board would have to determine. Staff goals is continued. When an FT is requested, the funding for the position will include costs for each of the services. One of the things that we need to do a better job is the software licenses, for instance, are increasing materially. So if we ask the board for a new position, we need to give you the full costs, not just the estimated costs for the wages and the labor load. To ensure all projects are completed in the budget year. If they're not completed, we've got a system in place to make sure that they carry forward. One of these schedules is that, and again, that's something that I think is something that would help you as a board members to determine if you want it or not. In some cases, these projects will carry forward 2 or 3 years, and that's something that we'd like to identify. Do you need a policy in that you need to review that capital project? If it's been carried forward all these years, do you need it? And because if you don't, it frees up money for something else. So that's something that I'd like to have separate again. Almost finished. Budgets which are under control of the department managers can only be amended by the senior managers. So one of the problems that I'm getting is that I'm getting some staff members. You as directors may go to a staff member, a manager rather than a senior manager, and then there's a change and the senior manager goes, well, I didn't know about it. So what I'm requesting is that if there's going to be a change in the budget, regardless of what it is that you and the senior manager would come to finance and we would make the change, and someone can't come back to me and go, surprise, I didn't know about it. Department managers will review their budget and set baseline operational budget. We need to do a better job on that baseline. What I'd like to do is that 5-year budget that you're authorizing should be very close. So if the board agrees to have the tax requisition impact for all the 5 years, it should be very close. The capital and operational budgets will continue to be separate. I talked about that earlier. And this is more of operational. Just thought the board might, this is the last slide. Thought the board might like to see how the process is. The senior managers enter the budget in what's a software called Questica, which is a budget software. I then transfer to what I call the in-house budget, which gives us more information. It calculates the portion by service. We produce a tax requisition, the board adopts it, and then staff re-enters it back into Questica so the managers can go back to the software that they're used to. It's an extra step that I believe was needed just to make it easier for the managers so that they can go, there's a continuity. Just because I'm here, they shouldn't adjust to what I want. So what I did is I worked with the managers and had it work with what they are used to. And yes, I'm done.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Zafino. Hand over here from Director Gettins. Go ahead.
Thank you, the chair. Thanks for this, Mr. Zafino. I don't think you should apologize for giving us information and slides and taking time to do this. I think this is one of the most important roles that we have in governance, and the more time we invest in it and doing it right, the better I think we're doing our job. So I appreciate it, and I'm fine to take the time and do this well. I really do appreciate your suggestions about the baseline. I've been wanting a 5-year budget that we can kind of count on a little bit more than what we sometimes see in a budget, and it hasn't come to pass as well as we could have. So I agree with you. I think it's important for our citizens to know what's coming down the line, unless there's something else, because otherwise we're just sort of freestyling it far too much for most people's comfort. And I do think, yes, we keep the operations and the capital budget separate. Anything over 5%, is that recommendation or just a discussion point for me around the over 5%, we need more information? Thank you.
Mr. Zafino?
So that's just a recommendation that I put out there. That's something that the board needs to discuss.
Okay. Director Roberts, I seen a hand from you.
Thank you. And very much the same as Director Gettins. I really appreciate having the access to all the information and having the 5-year plan, because again, some things are carried over, some things change in regards to priorities, but it's nice to see that baseline. Really do appreciate it. The question though that I've always had, I really didn't know how to articulate it going forward, because a lot of times, and I've mentioned this in budget times before, a few times, that like in my rural projects, I'll end up with a line of salaries of managers, or even if they're from services I don't even have, and I could never really understand why those salaries or partial parts of salaries are just kind of helter-skelter. Like I would assume that they would be under said service, said department, and whatever percentage of that department, that's where I would find that individual's the amount of money. And then the same thing I found is, going a little deeper on things, you find an individual that is paid a good portion of their salary. They're a part of one department. They're also in the general admin, and I'm around my brain. I look at general admin as kind of like your office, like it's the paper, it's those things that serve all the departments. But if I'm going to find a person and their salary or what they're paid or what they're getting, or it's going up and down in regards to the service levels in said service or department, could you shed a little light on that? Because I find it a little challenging to wrap my brain, because it seems like sometimes people are in 3 or 4 different places rather than just neatly and tied into a service or a department. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Zafino?
So I'd like to start off with the rural project question. You're not the only director that's asked that. They see one line on there and it says $9,000 in wages. And then I'm asked, what does that mean? I then have to go back to the manager and break it down. It could be 3 or 4 different services, could be 3 to 4 different managers that put money in there. What I would recommend on that one there is continue doing the budget the way it is. However, if a manager puts in some wages that in your rural projects, that the budget also includes what that means. So we are limited and restricted to what having more, let's say we have the community services may have, let's say $6,000, and then we have utilities and we have, I'll just use finance. I can't have 3 different lines for the wages. The software wouldn't allow that. It's one line and one line only. But we can add, when we put it in the in-house software, we can add within the wages, this is who it is, this is why. And if that solves the issue, and I think it might, but again, it's your call. That would solve that part of the problem. The other part is, yes, there's a lot of questions about the wages within certain areas. And it's not something that's common where I can give you the names of the people. But one of the things that we can do as at the senior management level is justify that the wages in a certain area are appropriate. And that's something we as managers can sign off on. That's an operational thing where if there's something that is just obvious that doesn't belong there, we can catch it. But there's others where there may be managers that work sporadically in there, in general government, electoral government, that do belong. But that's something that is on my work plan to review for this year's budget of who's charging it and why.
Okay. Any other CAO? Go ahead.
I'll just add, so sometimes the road projects budget, if something comes along that isn't hadn't been anticipated at the budget time and it's not in the business plan or the budget, but the director has some gas tax money or other contingency funds in the rural projects budget, if we don't have a project identified in an other service, we'll often put not only the cost of the project, but the wages that go along with that into a rural project. So we'd have to look at the specific event or budget, Director Roberts, but there could be that it was just an unanticipated project.
Okay. Director Monteith, and then over to Director Gettins.
Through the chair, what about the electoral area admin? Is that also an equally complicated service? And who is actually charged to that service? Can we get some ideas?
Sure. I'll, if I may. So yes, very complicated. There's that review that I stated for the general government. We'll be doing that for electoral area admin. There's charges in there. I don't know the past, the history, but I will. This will be my fourth budget, and each budget I will look at something different, and I will be passing on my recommendations to the CAO, and if I have anything that I think is an anomaly that doesn't belong there, I will bring that up. So essentially, it would be like a comprehensive audit, which doesn't look at the dollars. It looks at the process and make sure that it's done appropriately.
Okay. CAO?
Yeah, so if I understand, so generally the administrative charges are the support services, so it's information services, HR, legislative services, and finance. And they're quantified during budget and then just assigned based on policy. Mr. Sfino has percentages that he charges. I think it's 3 categories, and they're just allocated to a service. So yeah, that would have to be looked at specifically based on any concerns that you would have.
Director Gettins?
Thanks, Chair. I think I just want to follow up with Director Roberts around that rural budget. I don't think it's what happens during the year that's confusing. See, when we start the budget process, it's just trying to figure that out. And I like this question. I know it like with Director Monteith, like these large, budget items that we have, we don't spend a lot of time. We'll talk about, a $6,000 grant 3 or 4 times during budget process, but we're not going to try and unpack general government. And I think it's worth spending a bit of time on the big ticket items, even it cannot be so complex. It's just numbers, right? They're just black and white. And that's what we need to know. But I appreciate starting early, and I would like to spend a little bit of time on the larger budgets, even if it's a workshop. And if you're not interested in going and learning more about electoral administration, because every time we talk about it, we find some new way of doing something or a way to somehow make it better for the taxpayer. So I just wanted to throw that in. I think we need to spend more time on the complex.
Okay, not seeing any other hands. So a direction, go ahead, Director Wiebe.
Maybe something to follow up. And I'm still new to this table, but I know one of the things that, again, I know we're a small village, but we tend to start with percentages and then work backwards. So we have a target percentage of what we were going to increase for the year, and then you kind of go, okay, well, this can go on this next budget, this one can't. Because I'll just say, sitting at 10% for the 2 years that or 2 budgets now that I'm a part of, I'm not comfortable with that. And I know there's reasons for it, and I know it doesn't take much at this level before my taxpayers notice 10% because it's a small tax base. And it may not be much of an increase, but it does make a difference to our taxpayers. But if that's something we can talk about moving forward is kind of setting that, I know we'd said kind of 5%. And so I was like hoping that we were somewhere there. We're looking at 10, and I'm sure there's things to add to or remove, but I just wanted to bring that up this morning. Thanks.
Okay. Comment, Mr. Safino, and then Mr. Holmes.
And I know your concerns, you're not the only one, and that's why I am recommending explaining about that 5% difference.
Okay, Director Holmes?
Yeah, just in Summerline, we do the same thing as in Caramus. Our CFO will come to us very early in the process and saying, this is sort of what we're looking at. Is council comfortable with that? And we all either fall off our chairs or we say, yeah, that's a good. We're comfortable with that kind of general area. And then it's good for staff to know that beforehand, because we're the ones who politically know what's acceptable for our communities. So if you're coming saying 10%, we're saying, that's not going to work, right? So I think staff need to know that. So.
Okay. I think that's the intention of putting in there the 2024 estimated budget. That gives us already that approximate percentage increase we're facing, not having dealt with any of the, we want a new staff person or we want all the wish list that's there. We do have to pay attention to that wish list a little better in the future.
So I know I don't want to jump in, but just a thought. I thought that estimate was based on what the next year's budget was put in by staff last year, not necessarily what. Do you know how we're not always doing our 5-year budgets correctly? So if we were using the 5-year budget put in from staff last year, that's what we would have this time. Is that what that was?
If the 5-year budget for 2024 doesn't change, that's will be the tax requisition. I thought that the board might be interested. You're correct. When you look at the wish list, it's good to know where you're starting out from. And with what I'm doing here is I'd like to do it for the 5 full years, and I'll extrapolate and increase an estimated assessment. So it's not using the 2024 assessment. I'm using the increased rate up for the 5 years.
Okay. All right. Director Knodel, I see a hand. Go ahead.
Thank you. I'm quite impressed with this. We kind of flounder along quite often trying to get to a set point. This gives us a point to basically start off from. I think it'll take a lot of the speed bumps out of the system. So I'm ready to push this ahead as a motion if that's what it takes to get us started using this system. We can always correct as we go along, but it seems like a good place to start from. Thank you.
Okay. Do we need a motion on this, or what are we looking for here? This is kind of supposed to be a workshop, but if we're not objecting to anything, is that the intent?
No, we're just, this is our plan right now. So unless I'd say committee disagreed with it, we'll just carry on.
Okay. So if there's something in this proposal that we're absolutely against, now's the time to say, hey, I don't want to do that, and then we can take it out. So everybody's clear on how we're moving forward. Director Federico?
Yeah. Sorry, a quick question popped into my head for staff. So how does the rate of inflation yearly impact how we determine what our 5-year budget is?
Go ahead.
In some municipalities, and I can't speak to the member municipalities that we have, is the council would go to the CFO and say, don't come to us with more than whatever the CPI or whatever percentage that there is. In this case here, I would tell you what the rate of inflation is, and then you see what the tax implication is. And since I've been here, it's been higher every time. And one of the biggest impacts in these budgets is that all of a sudden a capital project pops up out of nowhere because of a wish list, all of a sudden debt servicing would increase for borrowing, or the increase in transfers to reserves. And in some cases, most cases, some of the budgets in the electoral areas, you've got a transfer to reserves that was reduced in 2023 to, let's say, 10,000. It was 60. Well, for 2024, it's back to 60. Why? Because there's a capital project that needs to be funded. But by doing this, you can take a look at the 5-year project, the transfer to reserves, and you as a board can determine, is it worth having the 10% increase in taxes because of that? And one of the recommendations that I would like to follow is, if a senior manager wants to automatically put in a capital project that wasn't there in the previous years and they increase the transfers to reserves, it affects you directly. You need to be informed. And because there's probably a half dozen questions that happened in 2023 that was exact same result. And what happened? You as directors said, no, I'm not going to go for this, and you reduced the budget. And what that did is, all that really did is move the project from 2023 to 2024. And with that other software that I just told you, we can actually say, no, based on the amount of transfers to reserves that you're allowing, you can't do it until year 4 or year 5. We can do that now. And what you didn't see there is we have a virtual 5 more years on top of that we as managers I look at, and I can go and say, no, year 7 and 8, you could afford it. So that's something that is new, but it's important that transfer to reserves really affects your tax increase.
Yeah. Okay, I'm not seeing any other hands. It looks like we're generally comfortable with the suggestions, so we'll see what it all looks like when it comes our first budget meeting. That will be the test. Appreciate your recommendations, and thank you, Mr. Safino. Okay. RDOS website. Whom is presenting on that? I'll go to the CAO.
This will be Mr. Francisco and Mr. Thompson.
All right. We'll get them folks up and turn it over to them. Go ahead.
Thank you. Here with Danny Francisco. My name is Eric Thompson, I'm the communications supervisor. Danny Francisco, you all know, as the manager of information services. So we've created a short slideshow, probably take 10, 15 minutes, but hopefully we'll have time for questions. And this is on the website redesign. So you all know we have a current website at the RDOS, and we have multiple other websites, platforms, and the idea is to try to amalgamate them and try to improve what is already here. So RDOS Communications and Information Services have been exploring some options to update the RDOS corporate website, and the project would include redesigning the platform, revising the content, and this would also include improving accessibility and navigation. As part of the website redesign, the plan would include amalgamating some of the current RDOS websites. Bringing websites under one umbrella is common practice for most local governments. It helps residents, property owners, and visitors find the information they need. We often talk about not burying information. This would help with that process. Slide 3, please, Danny. Sunshine Coast Regional District, SCRD, recently redesigned its website. It was a lengthy and involved process. And I wanted to point out that on the top right portion of that website, you'll see a language translator. And that's an interesting option. It would, of course, have to start with French because it's our second language, of course. But we have identified a number of languages in this region that we think are important. And that's certainly something that would be part of a public engagement process would be, I think that one has 6 to 8 languages. We want to make sure that those are the right languages for this region.
I just wanted to mention one thing about that as well. In addition to languages as well, we're looking at accessibility. So accessibility options for people in need, things like that. So with screen readers and those capabilities. So those would be other features that we make sure are up to date on the next new migration of our website. Thanks, Eric.
Yeah, that's a good point. You can go to the next slide if you'd like, Danny. The SCRD website redesign project came to the attention of RDOS Communications during a monthly online meeting, and that is held with regional district communications professionals from around the province. It's a meeting that's facilitated by RDOS Communications. It provides opportunities to discuss some of the challenges and opportunities local governments have when it comes to sharing information online and in person. And through those discussions, it can certainly streamline the process of redesigning the RDOS website if that's a decision the board decides to go with. Because we don't have to start from scratch. There is a lot of information, and speaking with the communications professionals around the province, we've learned where some of the pitfalls are, and that will really help us avoid those. A website needs to be accessible, as Danny mentioned. It needs to be easy to navigate. And if you look at this one, this is just an example, but big font, large font, pictures, current information updated regularly. It really makes it a lot easier for people to find the things and makes it easier for staff to direct people to where we think they might need information or information we'd like them to get, and also posting information that we've been asked often for. And that Google Analytics and analytics to the website will help identify exactly what people are searching for. Sharing information that residents, property owners, and visitors need in a timely manner is certainly a top priority for RDOS Communications, and I know from speaking with members of the board and presenting here, that thought is shared by the board. Local governments cannot rely on the media to share information alone. We are, as you know, in the middle of an EOC activation, and local media have been paramount in sharing information, but the specifics of it, especially on day-to-day operations, we can't rely on media alone. And on occasion, headlines and news coverage may be confusing or unintentionally misleading. Incendiary headlines or even inaccurate reporting can further complicate the delivery of important information. It's not to suggest that happens, but with proper information available and accessible and available in a timely manner, we can make sure that if there is any misinformation, we can make sure people can find what they need easily. And we don't want it buried in a deep report. We want it broken down through a website that makes it easy to find. It's also important not to rely on social media as a primary source of information during an emergency. We're using Twitter, we're using Facebook. It is effective, but it can't be the only thing. We keep constantly mentioning to people during emergencies, we being the RDOS EOC, that you should check the official sources for information. I'll go to slide 6, Danny. I think that might be coming up. Based on preliminary research, the service requirements for a web developer would likely include the following. That's the next slide, Danny. So present a proposal and timeline, schedule some weekly meetings. This would be from the vendor. Content migration. That's a real big part of all of this. And speaking with SRCD, they had some challenges with that. They had multiple PDF documents and different things, and they sent out a nice information release that said, we're doing this now, we may have to pause. So they went back to the old website, and because technology is challenging when you're starting from scratch on a new website. So we would require people to be patient, but we'd have to ensure we communicate that. We'd also require support, orientation, and training. So that would be a big part of this as far as service requirements. The next slide, I want to focus for a moment on security. Cybersecurity is one of the most important areas of focus for any web platform. According to VI Group Data Consulting, which is based in Penticton, they provided us with some information. I know one of the principals, Nick Vincent, and I asked him if he could share some information with me that I could take to the board just as an example of cybersecurity, because he deals with it every day and has for years. So he's told me that cybersecurity's function is to safeguard the integrity, accessibility, and confidentiality of data. When considering any new IT project, ensuring that cybersecurity is part of the conversation from the beginning to the end, that protects the regional district's reputation and public integrity. It ensures the smooth operation of online services and is likely essential for legal compliance as well. Websites tie into many critical systems and need to do so in a secure way. Cybersecurity starts and ends with human interactions, which is why reducing error through simplicity of the user's experience is so important. So we'll move to the next slide, Danny.
Sorry, I want to add one thing to that. When it comes to some of these safeguards and security, we've been doing the preliminary work as well. Even the types of colors matter so that people just don't mimic our websites, but we have our actual fonts, color schemes, things like that. So these are things that we work on. There's development already been done about what does our brand look like, and brand comes into security at some point as well, so that the staff and the general public and everyone can feel secure that this is a genuine RDOS type website or article or everything from a valid source, as Eric just mentioned.
Thank you, Danny. What does it cost? We'll just all ponder that for a moment. So in speaking again with some different professionals around the industry and web developers, you're looking at potentially between $80,000 and $150,000. There's a number of reasons for that. Certainly you could go low, but in speaking with one of my colleagues, they mentioned that they asked for a certain amount of money and they went on the high end and they didn't need that much. They actually needed less. So in that particular case, they used a little bit of the extra money for some of the other elements that come into this, because this number does not include staff. So once the website is built, and the idea is that it's functional for a long time, it can be upgraded and dealt with, but it's a platform you can use for a long period of time with any type of updates you need. But there is the operation of it, and there is the ongoing content and that type of thing. But when you get that right, you can, I believe, save a lot of staff time. And I'll just give you a very quick example. I've just come from the EOC, where I've posted the latest information release, and I went into the RDOS website to do it. And then I jumped over to the EOC website, and then we went to, I won't bore you with the details. We can streamline that process with the right website. Danny, if you can go to slide 9, the next steps in this project, I'll get to that in a second, but I was going to mention we have our regional connections platform. There is an opportunity, if we explore and when we find the right vendor, that we could amalgamate that. So we're no longer paying for now a third-party website. Maybe some of those project elements can be worked into this website, which would be great, because then it's one less third party we're using and saving some considerable money. And also not asking people who are living in the area, residents, property owners, and also visitors, to go to yet another platform to find information. So the next steps in this process would be developing a thorough action plan and budget. Some of that work has already been done. We have an action plan, as I mentioned, that's already built for us based on what some other regional districts have done. And then once a budget is theoretically approved, RDOS Communications and Information Systems will work together to create and issue a request for proposals actually. And then work would start on redesigning the website. And that's it. We'll go to questions, comments, answers. Thank you, by the way.
Okay. See a hand from Director Roberts. Go ahead.
Thank you. I really appreciate this, and I've come to grips with the challenges trying to get the local constituent to reach out to the right place, and then try to navigate, create my own little template. So I sent it out, and I appreciate that. And I think just after having a discussion around budgeting, I think it was really important. I really like that you add the part of the savings, because I think a lot of times we see the number, but when we look at staff time, we look at it's kind of like looking at a 5-year plan. 5 years, how much are we going to be saving? A lot of times we look at, I'm going to go chase the big dollar because I want to go, so I'm going to go work there, but I don't take into consideration my gas, my travel, and all that. And I realize that that's part of my salary. So sometimes the bottom line in and of itself can be a little misguiding. So I really appreciated, Eric, you adding the benefits in regards to that, because I think we have to have that as well, so that when we're looking at in regards to approving a budget, not only are we approving the money out, we're looking for what savings we gain. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I've got Director Gettins and then Director Holmes.
Yeah, thanks to the chair. Thanks for the presentation. I don't think it'll be a huge surprise that I'm a big in favor of improving our website. I find our website so costly in citizen time, in my time, not being able to find information. by the time someone calls me, if they've been on the website, that is a long phone call because there's a ton of frustration. So I'm really, really glad. And if this is something we can get done this term, I will be thrilled. So thank you. I just have to give a shout out to the city of Penticton and Summerland too. You both of your communications and the insight and the connecting to the citizens. Like, I really feel like I know what's going on all the time, and it's easy to find whatever I need. And when I go onto the website, even to try and find the budget from last year while Jim is here, so I could ask, oh my God, no. So I'm all favor for it. So thanks so much.
Okay, Director Holmes.
Thanks. I remember us talking, last time we talked about the website, came up the idea that working with the municipalities so that we'd have the same look and feel across throughout the whole region. I'm just wondering if that was ever followed up, if I ever got any traction with that idea, and where we're at with that.
To the chair?
Go ahead.
We haven't gotten to that phase yet because we're still in this question about what would happen. Absolutely, that is part of the discussion. It would make a lot of sense. I've been to Summerland's website, and you and I have discussed that. I should mention to the chair, by the way, that it's a little old. It's a little slow. It has some challenges, but the main thing is, can people find what they need? And I think this presents an opportunity to pool our resources potentially. And I know Karamias would probably be interested in any other municipality. There is an opportunity there for sure. And that would really go to the RFP to make sure that that makes sense in all of that, how it all works together. A lot of moving parts, but not impossible. And I'm still at this early stage of my career in local government, an optimist.
I wanted to add one thing to that as well, just to let you know, the website is an organizational piece of software, really. So on the back end, we have been communicating with other vendors and, for instance, what City of Penticton have used in their migration, things like that. But that is just a step in the process of this complete change, because it is quite a large project to undertake. Currently, our website is hosted with a third party to see even if the tools we go to are able to be done on those things. So that's where the kind of cooperation within the RDOS and the different teams here is really important. So working with Eric and Legislative Services and IS to bring those two pieces together. And that's what you're seeing here. And we're looking at that kind of vision for the future and discussing on many levels what it takes to run a website for an organization. So that's where these pieces are starting to come together, and hence the time and kind of effort needed to do a website. It is a big project, but it's so valuable for an organization. Thanks.
Okay, I've got Director Weeb and then Director Federico.
So first, just to clarify, because Mr. Thompson was speaking quickly, I believe I heard you say that you were facilitating the BC Regional District Communication Networking. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's just an ad hoc group to the chair. We meet the last Friday of every month online, 10 o'clock in the morning. And yes, the RDOS communications section facilitates that meeting.
Okay, I just, sometimes people skip over the good work that our staff are doing, especially when it's themselves involved, and they're like, well, just, speeding along. It's like, I wanted to pause for a second, because I think the work that came out of that is helpful for what we're doing here. And so thank you for what you initiated, because it's helpful. And then also too, just, I know Karamias wasn't directly involved in presently, thank you, that we're not presently involved in some of the stuff that's been going on directly east of us, but the alerts have been phenomenal. The information, timely, even I noticed our MLA was saying, hey, if you need to know current information, go to the RDOS, because that's the most up-to-date, accurate information. So again, I just wanted to, no question, just kudos. Thank you very much for the work that you guys do.
Okay, I got Director Federico, and then
Great, thank you to the chair. Our recreation program registration software, is that something that can be rolled into the new website, or would that stay separate?
Eric?
To the chair, I would say everything's on the table. Certainly, if processes are in place and contracts are in place, we don't want to change that. And in some cases, the financial back end, it makes more sense to use a third party, and same with bookings. But that would be, everything would have to be looked at for sure. And I've got the microphone, if I can just mention that I think during this current EOC activation, the cooperation that we've had with the town of Osoyoos and with BC Wildfire is a good example of where working together, it can make so much sense if we have a process in place to get information out to people, because that at the end of the day is the goal, is to provide accurate, timely easy to find information to everyone. So whether you're in Osoyoos or right on the border of Osoyoos, and someone told me just last night that their parents were on evacuation order from Osoyoos, and they had to find information, and they couldn't find it, but they phoned Osoyoos, and the people there were extremely helpful and told them where they could find it. So having similar websites as a long-term goal, so that when you go to one and the other, it all kind of blends into one, because we're finding people are traveling so much, and they might have family in one place or property in another place. If everything is completely different within a regional district, that's not helpful to what I would like to call our customers.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I'd like to
Go
add
ahead.
one thing shortly. As the ecosystem, I'm going to say, of services expand and change, we're looking at hybrid models and how to bring in other systems. So this is a change, something that you haven't seen in the RDOS before from like 10 years ago. We are becoming part of other systems. So incorporating regional connections like we currently do, or recreation sites, things like that. There's going to be a mixture of this moving forward. That's just the world we live in. As we're doing that, we're developing better systems that are connecting together. So even the regional recreation program, we're continuing to involve that to make sure it's interconnected. As upgrades happen to the website, that integration happens further and further. This is a learning process for all our vendors as well. So as we're moving from on-premise systems to this hybrid world, it's a learning curve for us, and we are looking at incorporating that as well to make that ultimate goal of the simplicity that we represent in the slideshow a reality. So that's happening always in the background, just so you know.
Okay, thanks. Director Taylor and then Director McCordoff.
Yeah, I think there's probably a cycle to this kind of thing. You know, like we got here with good decisions, best efforts of, you know, your predecessors, et cetera. But there's a cycle, and we've got to update. And I think we have really good staff to lead this kind of a initiative. Really impressed similarly with the information and some of the changes that I've seen just in my short period. I think this is a necessary change, and we should be moving in this direction with a decision as quickly as we can.
Okay, thank you. Director McCordoff?
Thank you. I was going to bring this up in my report later, but I think considering what we've just been talking about, I'd like to say now that that this coordinated effort of BC Wildfire, RDOS EOC, Town of Osoyoos, firefighters from all up and down the Okanagan has been like, it's just a really heartwarming experience that we've gone through. And I just can't thank all of you enough. It's been phenomenal. Yesterday we had Minister Sajjan, who's the federal minister for emergency preparedness. And we went up and had a look at the wildfires and where the fire came down to within feet of people's properties. And yet within 48 hours, that had been solved and people were back in their homes. And that's because of a coordinated effort from everybody. And I was telling him that on last Thursday, we had an emergency management workshop for local government officials, and somehow we managed to make it work. Right now, there's an amazing coordination between the incident command team here in Canada and the United States in Washington, and they are working together. And I mean, how interesting, how cool is that? So I just want to thank everybody involved, especially Eric, who's done an amazing job of getting us all organized online and getting people in there to talk about it, the BC wildfires and all of the people necessary. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
To the chair, can I jump in on that?
Sure, go ahead.
I must immediately deflect that. I have been an important part in the sense that I'm the section chief for information, but that when I say important part, is only one very small part. There is an information section team behind the scenes, including RDOS Communications and some of the other people. We brought in people from other areas to help shadow. And it goes right through the organization, especially through the EOC, for all the people that are feeding that information. I think often we become the face of that, especially when we do those video briefings. People think I'm leading the emergency response, and I certainly am not. We appreciate the kudos, but it is shared with many, many people behind the scenes, certainly including Danny's team, who are working to make sure, like getting us a power bar earlier today. Just think, I mean, not the food, the actual plug-in, and making sure all the technology works. So, but thank you, we appreciate it. I'll pass it along.
I thank you, because I know that you're the face of it, Eric, and I know that everybody's working behind the scenes, because it takes a coordinated effort from everybody, and it's been amazing to watch. Thanks.
Absolutely. Okay, any other questions and stuff on the website? Looking like everybody's thinking. So a quick question is this going to be something that we're talking about at budget time, or is this a decision we need to make a little bit sooner than that?
Well, and maybe you may want to jump in, but I think the next step would be we have to really start getting a plan in place, which we've been developing, and going forward, we'd come up with a board report and a recommendation, and following through the budget process. The goal would be, once we follow that process, to get started in 2024. But obviously, it has to go through the budget cycle. If we can get it in this current budget cycle, we'd like to follow that process.
Okay, just so everybody knows how we're proceeding with it. Seeing no more hands, thank you very much for the update and the presentation. And again, thanks for all the work you guys are doing. It's great. Website, outstanding board action, CAO.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So one of the important parts of our accountability framework is that when the board passes a resolution or a bylaw or gives some direction at a committee or board meeting, Legislative Services captures that, and we put it on our board action tracker. So you've got the current example of that in your package today. What I wanted to do was just go through some of these, and then if there are any questions about where we are in the process, that we could dispose of those. We do have some old ones on here. You can see that our oldest one is from 2018. This was the residents on Green Mountain Road out of the 2018 floods, where the road disappeared and their property started to shift. And we have a no occupancy order on it. And the reason for that is that we had geotechnical experts in, and they said it was not safe to resume habitation on it. What we've done, though, and so we started the process of putting the notice on title and injunctive action in order to make sure they didn't go back in there when it wasn't safe. Always with the condition that if they did their own geotechnical report and they had mitigating actions that were recommended to them, and they took those, that they could then rehabilitate. They haven't done that so far. I'm not sure if they intend to. We know that the occupant is not there right now. They're down south, but there has been discussions back and forth. So we do work with them. Even though we put the notice of title and the order on, we're always interested in working with the occupants or homeowners on those properties to try and resolve the issue. But at this point, that is still under order and is still outstanding. The next one that's outstanding is in 2020. Anytime we go to court, we know that it's probably going to take us a couple of years. And in this case, it certainly has. This is with our lawyer right now. This is 3226 Myers Road. It's an untidy and unsightly contravention, and that is being scheduled for a court date. And same with the untidy, unsightly on 847 Highway 5A in Area H. That's a legal file now, and that is in progress. There was mention of our strategic priorities earlier on when we were discussing budget. One of those is housing. We did take a start at that with an options paper to committee on housing options a couple of months ago. But we're definitely not done with that. That is one of the things that we're waiting for planning to get rid of the regional growth strategy and the OCP so that they can spend some time working on these other higher priorities. But nevertheless, we do have that on the outstanding list, and we'll be talking about that more shortly. The one about the zoning and land use bylaw on 500-520 Highway 97. So this is a building inspection infraction. And again, that one, this is the one we deferred until December 31st, I believe it is. We said put a notice on title, but give them until the end of the year in order to undertake some action on that. So that one is still pending. So that stays on the list. This next one in Vintage Views, this was where we have a part of the subdivision in Vintage Views that, because it's Vintage Views, they're sort of on the side of a cliff and they don't really have the setbacks to meet our zoning bylaw. And we said, let's do them all at the same time. I think there's 19 properties in there. With the current situation with regards to wastewater treatment, we aren't able to issue building permits on vacant lots. So that's not quite as important an issue right now. So it's still on the list, but it's pending, and we'll get to it, but it's just not being a high priority for us right now. We still are working on the subdivision servicing bylaw, and that will be coming. We're getting closer on that. The one at 3548 Fruitvale Road, where the covenant contravention, that was a building inspection one as well. And that, where was that? That's, was supposed to go back to the June 15th board for update per resolution. So we'll have to check that one to see if there is some progress on that one. Was that? What number was that? There are 4 of these that we have with notices on title, and we gave them a certain period of time in order to undertake action. Those 4, just to summarize on those, there has been no action. We've been trying to work with the property owners in order to bring them into contravention. Usually it's just a matter of them applying for a permit, but none of those 4 have made their deadlines. So we will be proceeding now with the injunctive action on those. And then we're now into 2023, and some of these actions that have come out of the 2023 board meetings, most of these are either building infractions or untidy, unsightly. They're usually something that requires additional assistance. We know that we're still waiting on the ESDP review with the provincial federal audit. That came back, and we're still waiting for them to come back with some additional information on that. Some of them we've got on our list will take a while. So the Okanagan Falls Incorporation, yes, we had the resolution, we're started, but that won't resolve until later on in the year. So that stays on the list, and we'll report on that from time to time. And then we're right up to current. So unless there's any other questions on the outstanding action list or the board action tracker, Mr. Chair, we'll just carry on.
Okay, I'll just check with the board if there's any questions on that. Not seeing any hands. All right, so that brings us down to the Q2 activity reports. Were you wanting to do a quick presentation on that, or an update, or should we just ask questions there? Okay, so back to the board. Is there any questions on The activity report, Q2 activity report. This was on from the last meeting and got postponed, so Director Gettins.
Thanks. I do have a question about the asset management, because I see that it's complete. Will we, as a board, get like a presentation on that and what that means to us for planning? Because I know, like, for some of, unless if I'm getting this correct, that some of our water systems that I have, I think we've got really good, some have really good, money for operations and upcoming expenses. But I don't know if it's $600,000 is enough, or do we need $6 million for that? Like, is there some of that information that'll be coming from that asset management software program?
CAO?
So asset management is really life cycle planning on most of our infrastructure. And yes, we will get clearer estimates on that type of information. This part of it that we're working on now is really the software part. So the board approved the purchase of a specific software package. We have an administrative committee now, so finance is working with all of the departments that have infrastructure, whether vehicles or underground, even pieces of equipment, to get that into the asset management software program. And once we do, we'll have a much clearer idea that we can then use to set up reserves. It also involves a reserves policy, which the board passed earlier this year, and that sets up certain percentages of the operating budget as a target for us to develop reserves. And unfortunately, we do tend to use our surpluses to balance at the end of the year. So we'll get there, but may take us a while.
Okay, any other questions? Not seeing any hands. So down to the corporate action plan, CAO.
All of those items that you identified when we were talking about the business plan earlier this year. And again, I wanted to just highlight that while we were discussing budget and the matter of the strategic priorities came up and that workshop that we did with Gordon McIntosh as to how they fall in and how we make sure that we're continually working on those. I put another section. You can see that we use a dashboard on this, and I'll fall back on that. But under that third page, where we identify, first of all, how we're doing. So green is always, we're on schedule on budget. Yellow, there may be a minor issue. Red probably means we aren't going to accomplish that during this calendar year. And we're still pretty good right now. I haven't seen any issues that are coming up with what we've set out as far as where we're supposed to be at the end of Q2. We always have a different color for each quarter in the progress section, and that's in identify where we are. So hopefully on that, you'll see that all the Q1, Q2 activities, our performance indicators, we're on schedule. We do have an accountability section on there, and those are the acronyms we use. I did add this new section on the chart. So this is a reference to our 2023 strategic priorities chart. So that was the document that Gordon McIntosh worked with the board on, and we came up with this strategic directions report. And in our plan and in Gord's strategic priorities report, anything that is bold all cap was a board now. And remember, Gord made you get down to 5 strategic priorities for the year. And then as we accomplish some of those and they fall off, that opens up the box for the next. And those are just all caps. And then we identified operational strategies, which were in bold. And there were some items or actions that were for advocacy or partnership. So they are identified in this same way in our business plan. So that now when we look at our Q2 corporate action plan, you'll see those identified in there and where we're standing on them. But generally, again, Mr. Chair, we're I mean, we use a numbering system on these. We have 4 key success drivers. The first one is internal, about a high-performing organization. The second one is external, about customer service or customer experience. The third is based around those 3 pillars of community sustainability, social, environmental, and economic. And then the fourth one is really about the board and oversight and a representative democracy. I know it sounds sort of funny as a key success driver, but that was what it was termed at the time. And then under those, we have goals, which are sort of longer term actions that we want to achieve in order to get within those bins of the key success drivers. Under each goal, we'll have a number of objectives. And under each objective, we have our performance indicators, which is really the action statements that we report out to you on. As far as key success driver number 1, I didn't see anything where we're outstanding on that. It all looks green to me. So our 4 goal statements about fiscally responsible, effective local government, healthy and safe organization, and high performance culture, we're good. The second, and we added on one. We had that IT-enabled tools, so we want to make better use of our electronic capability, which is where the web system would fall. I will point out, we have a couple of big ones in there. We currently use the School District 67 for our phone system. And they're changing direction with regards to that. And they've told us they won't do that for us anymore. I think it's as of August 11th. So that's why our Information Services Department has been busily, they're not in here anymore. Danny used to have all the phones. We've changed all of our phone handsets and all of the electronic capabilities, the servers, in order to provide our own phone system. So they're madly working away on that. To make sure that we hit that deadline from School District 67. And we're also doing that transition to the cloud. So a lot of our servers, which we actually had physically on site, we're now moving to the cloud on that. So that Microsoft 365 environment, which may have caused some of the problems with some people getting on this morning, because that involves Outlook and some of the emails may have gone to junk instead of into your email box. That is a short-term problem for us and will be resolved as soon as we get fully through the transition. The second key success driver is the external one. So this is about customer service and everything that we had identified as to where we wanted to be at this time of year. We're going to meet. We do have Voyant Alert discussion scheduled for an upcoming committee meeting. Previously at committee, you had indicated you wanted to have a discussion, a more detailed discussion about what we should be using Voyant for and what we should be putting through it. So Legislative Services has that coming back very shortly, as well as more discussion on social media that we want to get up to you as well. The second goal was to engage citizens. So this was doing our citizen survey. And I know that we have the results of that. I believe we'll probably be bringing in that with some recommendations as to what we're going to do about some of the comments shortly as well. Is that
That's coming
soon?
the first meeting in August. Yeah.
That's today.
Oh, sorry. First meeting in September.
Okay.
Is not the next meeting in August.
Okay.
August already.
And that's where our incorporation study fits in as well. You see we've got Q4 in there. We're well underway, but we won't see results on some of this until the end of the year, and we'll report on it at that time. So anything in Q2, you should see under status, you should see where we are on that, and that we've got a couple of some that may slip a little bit. Under this one about meeting public needs, we we have intended for the last year or so to talk about right to enter. This usually stems when one of our bylaw officers or building inspectors enters onto somebody's property in order to get a better idea of what's going on if they've had a complaint. So yes, we have the right to enter, but there are good ways to do it and bad ways to do it. And that's why we want to get a procedure up to the board. And the Ombudsman's office has come out with a
best practices.
A best practice. Yeah. So we're working on that. You can see, I'm not sure if this is the
Question
first.
from Director Taylor.
Yeah.
You said ombudsman, and I'm just wondering, ombudsman of what?
It's a provincial ombudsman office. Oh,
So that's a
ombudsperson.
general, okay, all right, thank you.
Okay, no problem.
Yeah, they're all about fairness and
I
transparency.
thought it was maybe specific to privacy or something like that.
No, no.
General.
You can see under 2.2.2.1 where we've got this Princeton Penticton transit route in capitals. So that was a next one. We're already working on that with the town of Princeton. But nevertheless, that's how you can see it's identified. And then under key success driver number 3 about developing the socially sustainable region. There is that one in caps, all cap bold, and that is one of your 5 strategic priorities that came out of the Macintosh workshop. So you can see that that was the emergency program study, which is now complete. But that is how we've captured your information from that workshop, just so we didn't lose it. And then under this key success driver number 3 about regional sustainability. So goal 3.1 is the socially sustainable region. You can see there are a number of objectives under there. This is more the softer services. So this will be about emergency management and parks. And then we go into the economic sustainability. This would be where we'd capture that ESDP stuff. And long-range planning. So most of the planning activities are under that. And then when we get into 3, you'll see it's about the environmental sustainability. And again, actually under objective 3.2.2, long-range planning, 2 of those were your strategic priorities. So the regional growth strategy and alternative housing options. Were both identified.
Question from Director Federico.
Yeah, thank you through the chair. Sorry, Bill, under objective 3.1.2, so just going back up a little bit, there's continued to pursue the acquisition of a portion of West Bench Elementary School. So the school board did go out recently with putting, I believe, that parcel and wanting Caledon up for sale. So I don't know if in a public meeting it's appropriate to ask the question, but did we pursue it at that point when the school board put it out to the public for sale?
Yeah, this is one where we rely on a different agency in order to make progress. So we've been asking for meetings with the school board ongoing, and we haven't been able to fit that in yet. But they had also informed us that they were doing their capital plan for their facilities and that they would get back in touch with us once they had concluded that. But no, we haven't been able to have that discussion with them. And same with PIB. I understand that the addition to reserve for West Bench has concluded, but PIB has yet to determine what they are going to do with that property.
Okay. Director Gettens?
Yeah, just as a follow-up, so is it publicly for sale now? Because the last time I spoke to the school board, they were still in minister discussions, and it hasn't been released to the public.
I wasn't aware that it had been listed for sale either.
Okay. There's like, did you see a for sale sign on there? Because we do have an interest in that conversation.
Sorry, all that I had seen, because I read through their board minute, so I just seen it pop up on there, and so I hadn't seen whether it had, sorry, I guess I should clarify, then I hadn't seen whether it had gone up publicly, but it had been in their minutes, so there'd been
considering it.
conversation about it, yeah.
Yeah, we, just as a backup, just for newer board members, last term, we did a presentation to the school district board about buying the northern field, because the school right now doesn't use that field, and then there's also a gravel lot. Then they did their planning, and then COVID came, and we've been bumping and bumping and bumping since then, and then now I think they're ready to sell it, but we did some good work on that, so I hope that they loop back to us before we have further discussion. Thanks.
Yeah,
Not hurt
that's
to
a good
reach out.
point. We'll get back to them, see if they've made any, if they want to talk to us.
All right.
Yeah, other than that, let me just see what we got in this one about providing governance and oversight in a representative democracy. So this is where we include our strategic planning cycle, and of course we've got an entrenched cycle and process that we follow on that now in order to make sure we meet our regulatory guidelines. And then we have one about promoting board effectiveness. And this is where we had our robust board orientation program and all the workshops that we had developed, which I know you were getting tired of. But nevertheless, that was information we got out of the 2018 election, was that orientation may not have been good enough. So better to err on the side of safety. And then this is also where we have working with our Indigenous communities. So we continue to look for ways to do that. We're going to talk about board evaluation when we get you into your legislative workshop. And we do have a really good relationship with our member municipalities now. The CAO group has a annual meeting schedule that we follow, let alone lots of discussions on some of the significant issues that involve us regionally. And we're always open to assisting member municipalities through our enterprise unit. Your official code of conduct, that has been through the CAO group, and I believe may be coming back at your next meeting in draft form for a committee to discuss. And then we had some of the advocacy issues that came out of the strategic priorities discussion for UBCM. And that is it, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Any questions on this? Director Taylor, go ahead.
Just a quick one on 3.1.1.5, advocate with the province for flood response funding. I'm just wanting to clarify, is that in fact flood response or conceivably some flood mitigation preparation?
Yeah, so this is where we'll be looking forward to a discussion with the working group, is that we need to find out what our regulatory foundation is for emergency preparedness before we talk about mitigation. We don't have a mitigation service right now. So we need to, a lot of the recommendations out of that emergency program study were about us not being set up quite right in order to take advantage perhaps of some of the opportunities out there. Right now, because we have this regional program and because we're so we're focused on who benefits for the money that is put into it, is that we stick just strictly to training, exercising, coordination, communication. When we get into a response, we're sort of all on our own, and we're funded mostly by the province through expense authorization form. And we have no mitigation, we have no service for mitigating any emergency response at all. And the recovery, I think, is something that needs to be discussed as well. Because we have more and more, the member municipalities are paying for their own emergency preparedness with their own emergency program coordinators.
Okay, I see a hand from Director Coyne. Senior, go ahead.
Yeah, this one's going back, I don't know the number of it. It's the vacation rental
TUP process, revisiting that, how soon is that going to be coming back? I don't know if we're going to have a discussion about it this afternoon, but we've got one in Area H that's coming up here shortly that has been referred out to APC, but we need to make some progress there. And I was wondering when we're going to get that report.
CAO, any idea as to when that might be coming back?
Yeah, we had the presentation from the city of Penticton and the results of their survey and where they're going with it. We have our survey out now, and planning, again, is hoping to get through the regional growth strategy stuff and the area EOCP to get those off so that they can sign resources to just specifically work on vacation rental. But it is next. So we're gathering information, and hopefully we can get back in for discussion on that in the next couple meetings.
Okay. I seen Mr. Garish come in. I thought maybe it was to do with this, but he was maybe just being here proactively. Director Taylor.
Yeah, just to follow on vacation rentals, and let's be clear, they're not rentals. It's not. But the City of Penticton presentation was really good and useful. There've been a number of other municipalities looking at this. From my take of it, municipal reactions has really changed in the last few years, and many of them are coming out with a different approach than the City of Penticton. And the City of Penticton had their reasons for doing what they're doing. So I just hope that we look at these other municipal responses as well. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Director Fedrigo?
Thank you through the chair. I think, did I see that there's an RFP out right now for vacation rental for a company to do a review?
There was a reason Mr. Garish came in. So go ahead, please.
Sure. Yeah. Yes, we just released an RFP last week, and it's the beginning process of the vacation rental review, and we're asking for a consultant to help us prepare just a background overview of what's happening in the electoral areas, and then the hope is that we can then present that to the board through committee and potentially workshop with you what the scope of the project will be based on what we then understand to be the situation in the electoral areas.
Okay, I see a hand from Director Coyne Senior. Go ahead.
Yeah, so for this one, I guess, Chris, is there a timeline on this RFP or anything? Because this is becoming a really big, very expensive issue for a lot of people, and I'm just wondering if is this going to be a next year project?
Any idea timeline?
Well, off the top of my head, I believe the RFP closes at the end of the month. Depending on the response, award shortly afterwards, give them a month or two to do the background work, and then hopefully in November have that workshop with the board, and depending on the direction received, then start to work on possible bylaw amendments or different approaches, or whatever the case may be.
Or if the board knows where they want to go right now and we don't need to do that, we could bring that forward and you could just let us know. But for us to do the research that would typically go along with a process like this before we make regulatory changes might take a little longer.
Yeah. Okay. I'm not sure where we're at as far as is all the electoral area directors on the same page on this? That I don't know. So I think there needs to be a little bit of work on it. But anyway, quickly, Director Monteith, and then.
Through the chair, I think this is important that we talk about it so we know what we're thinking as electoral directors before we spend money on a consultant. So I think this is an important topic.
We've talked about it many times, but we've never really talked about what everybody wants in their area. There's been a few that have stated what they're comfortable with, but the research might be important. So, Director Taylor, you have a question?
Yeah, I don't know what's in the RFP. I do know that there is extensive short-term rentals in my community, and I'm uncertain the extent of TUPs that are out there right now. So I think quantifying the extent of the problem is important, and I hope that that's going to be part of this.
I see the nodding of the head is if we don't know what the problem is or how bad it is, it's pretty hard to get a handle on it. So, Director Coyne again, Senior, go ahead.
I don't want to beat this to death, but Director Monteith is exactly right. We need to set some time apart or aside to do this because obviously what we're doing isn't working in my mind. I think we all got the letter from the fellow that was here last week and our last board meeting that, you know, he spent $60,000 upgrading a septic tank and $2,500 for a application fee, and just to be at the end of the day said, no, you can't do that. Well, and now I've got this one that I've got coming up. The folks out at Eastgate, you know, they've done all their due diligence. They've spent a whole pile of money getting all these things done, and only the neighborhood didn't know anything about it. So now we need to be able to have an open discussion and deal with this in a constructive manner rather than trying to slot it into something else, because I don't believe that TUPs are the way to go. It's a zoning issue, it's a commercial issue. There's a whole lot of questions in my mind that need to be answered because the neighbors and the whole community need to know that there are commercial ventures going on in their backyard, whether they like it or not. So I think we need to either allot a workshop on this or do it at a board meeting where it's in the public and that people have some input into this, because it's not good the way it is right now in my mind. Thank you.
I don't disagree with that. I think there's some changes potentially coming from the province as well in how they deal with it. So that could impact what goes on. But last shot, Director Federico, and then.
Yeah, and on that note, I'll just put forward that I've got 2 nonprofits in our community who actually want to have requested to come forward to a planning and development committee meeting to talk about vacation rentals.
Yeah. Well, if we have that on the delegation at some point, if we're dealing with that, but okay, we'll take that into consideration of how to proceed with having a discussion. Might be a workshop, but we'll talk about it and see where we can go. Seeing no more hands, we'll look for motion to adjourn. Moved, seconded, thank you. All in favor? Great. I don't believe anybody's opposed, so we're going to carry that, and it is now lunch.
And so he prefers just to stay in Maramata and do. Yeah, maybe the off season, so it could be like half liters or smaller, just kind of like grab and go. Yeah.
Okay, I'm getting the signal. We're good to go here, folks. So we will call the Regional District Okanagan-Similkameen regular board meeting to order. Just a reminder, this is your opportunity to remove anything off the consent agenda if you want to discuss it in the regular portion of the meeting. Last chance for anybody wanting to remove something off the consent agenda. Seeing nothing, looking for a motion to approve the agenda. Moved, seconded, thank you. All those in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? Motion carries. That brings us to the corporate services consent agenda. Looking for a motion in that one. Moved, seconder, thank you. All those in favor? Great. Any opposed? Motion carries. There is no consent corporate or development services, so down to development services. Item B1, CAO, the 1 hectare mobile homes on 1 hectare.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Yeah, so we did discuss housing options at committee, and we're looking for options. And one of the ones we thought about was allowing mobile homes as a type of accessory dwelling on lots of greater than 1 hectare in area in order to meet that 1 hectare rule. And so we're bringing this forward for approval, Mr. Chair, and we're recommending that we give this first and second reading and then proceed to public hearing before the board on August 17th.
Okay. Is there someone willing to move that motion? Moved and seconded? Great, it's on the floor. Any discussion on it? Director Gettins, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks to the chair. How does this work with the 1 hectare policy then? Because we don't have that resolved or anything yet with the Okanagan Water Basin and making that different. So do you have to have then a 2 hectare parcel to have a mobile home?
Just got to be bigger than 1 hectare is my understanding, but let's check with Mr. Garish.
Yeah, so we're still waiting for feedback from OBWB on their interpretation of the 1 hectare policy and how it applies to accessory dwellings. But the issue with mobile homes is that back in 2016, the board had previously taken a very restrictive approach to mobiles, and there was no zones that they were allowed on outside of Area H. And so we put the question to the board at that time as to, were they open to having it in a broader range of zones? And the feedback that we got was yes, but there was a limitation put, and that was 4 hectare minimum parcel size. But of course, since then, we've had a couple of applications come forward that the board has supported mobiles on less than 4 hectares. We're aware of other owners in the community who would like to do something similar. So rather than have each person go through a rezoning process, this would remove a regulatory burden and allow for us to issue building permits for them on parcels greater than 1 hectare. But yeah, we are still waiting on OBWB for the 1 hectare resolution with accessory dwellings.
So just to confirm, then this is the primary dwelling, not an accessory dwelling
This would be for accessory.
on 1 hectare. Okay.
Yeah.
Parcels greater than 1 hectare is the key there. Director Van Elfen.
Thank you, Chair. Through the chair. So when you say mobile, what classification, what inspection, is it, CSA approved? I can go to Ritchie Brothers by camp housing per se, which is CSA approved in Alberta, but maybe not recognized in British Columbia. What qualifies?
Mr. Garish?
So at the moment, the bylaws, so there's the Canadian Standards Association A277, which applies to the modulars, and those are allowed in all zones. We just treat them as single detached dwellings. And then the other standard that we use is the Z240, which is for the mobiles. And so what we're talking about today is the Z240s.
Okay. Any further discussion on this? Not seeing any hands. This one is a rural vote, so I'll call the question. All those in favor? Thank you. Opposed? Motion carries. Down to B2. Petition to enter the service area in electoral area I, CAO.
Yeah, this is amendment to the service establishment bylaw for the Cleveland Fire Department. There are 11 properties on Highway 3A just west of Marin Valley that are petitioning into the service. We understand the service is able to serve them. So we're recommending that this get first, second, and third reading, Mr. Chair.
Okay, I'll go to Director Monteith. Direction on this one?
Thank you. I'd like to make the administrator recommendation, please.
Okay, so it's moved. Is there a seconder for that? Thank you. It's on the floor. Any discussion? Fairly straightforward. All are in agreement with it as far as the parties that have got to deal with it. So it's up to us. And this one is a corporate vote. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? Motion carries. B3, zoning bylaw amendment in electoral area C, CAO.
This is the Backyard Farms dining experience, Mr. Chair. So it is now ready for adoption.
Go to Director Knodel. Go ahead.
Administrative recommendation, please.
Okay, so he's moving to adopt. Is there a seconder? Thank you. Discussion on this one? Seeing no hands, again, this one is a rural vote. All those in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? Motion carries. Brings us down to C, Finance, bylaw in Area B for Community Works, CAO.
Yeah, this is Director Bush wants to authority to withdraw $1,000 from his Area B Community Works Program, Mr. Chair, for the South Similkameen Museum Society, and we're looking for 3 readings and adoption.
And I'll go to Director Bush. Go ahead. He's moving it, seconded, it's on the floor. Any discussion on this one? Seeing no hands, this one is again a corporate vote. All those in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? Motion carries. C2, Asset Management Policy in the Tangible Capital Asset Policy, CAO.
Yeah, so this is 2 policies, Mr. Chair, and we're recommending that the asset management policy and the tangible capital asset policy be adopted.
Direction from the board on this. Anybody? Director Roberts is moving it, I'm assuming. Thank you. Is there a seconder? Seconded. Perfect. Any discussion? Looking and making sure I'm not missing any hands online. Seeing no hands, again, a corporate vote. All those in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? Motion carries.
Might just hang tight.
Golly, whipping through here. Nothing under legislative services, so CAO report.
Just before we go to that, Mr. Chair, there were some questions about the asset management program earlier on today, and we do have our experts here at the table. So if there were any follow-up questions about asset management, it would be opportune to have them.
Here's a chance to ask some questions. I think Director Gettins was one that was asking, so go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. What I want to know is how healthy the infrastructure is in Area F as far as reserves go. And that's what I'm looking to see. I don't expect to have that answer right now, but I'm hoping that we get to that place where we know how much reserves we should be putting away, and so we can explain that to citizens as to what we're doing with their money.
Go ahead, Mr. Safino.
There's going to be a revenue policy coming to the board with a recommendation on what the assets should be. And it's going to look at the philosophy of, does the board want the user of today to pay, a user of tomorrow to pay, which means borrowing, debt borrowing, etc. So that's, it's pretty close to being completed, and you should receive it in September. And that should help answer your question. That will answer your question.
Sorry, if I can just ask a quick follow-up. So does that mean, like, for every water system, it'll be like, this is how much money you should have in reserves to be healthy?
Every service
Okay.
will have it.
Okay, great. That's pretty much what I wanted to know. Thanks.
Okay. Director Federico?
Yes, thank you through the chair. How right now paying for facilities? So for example, in Naramata, we have the library, the OAP, and the thrift store, which is one facility. And so there was concern, like the roof had some leaking. So my understanding is that there's a reserve budget for that facility, but we don't have an operational budget that's just for that one specific parcel. So does that mean that funding is lumped in with our like full corporate facilities, that if it needed funding for upgrades or things that were to happen, it's not a specific service for our area?
Go ahead, Mr. Safino.
So you're correct, there is a service for that, and there is money in capital. And what you just stated, a roof would be, if it's a major capital, if it's a small repair, it's operating. But if it's a major repair or major upgrade, that's capital. The majority of the services, when I started, did not have operating reserves. They're slowly increasing it. Whenever you have a surplus, the board directed staff to put it into operating. So right now, you've got a small operating reserve, but not enough to do any good.
So that facility she's speaking of does have a service area?
Yes, that's the museum you're talking about, the building? No, which one?
This one's our OAP and library.
You do have a library reserve. I'd have to look at the bylaw to see what the reserve which it should be used for. And I know it's more used more than just the library, and that's what you're talking about.
Okay. Director Holmes.
So now that we have the policy, what's the next step? Does that allow us to make those long-range strategies and
Yeah, well, the policy will be used by the different departments in the Asset Management Committee in developing department asset management plans and levels of service policies. So the overall asset management policy is just sort of a governing document that provides the framework for the staff to develop the rest of the program that we need to.
Okay. Follow up? Oh, go ahead, Jim.
I just want to add that with the asset management robust, all the information in there, I fully expect a full 5-year capital plan and hopefully 10 years. That's what the goal would be with this policy and the software that the board allowed us to purchase.
Okay. Director Taylor.
I'm just wondering what sort of a staff impact this has operationally in terms of getting all the data in order for the asset management plan to tell you what it needs to tell you. How many people do you have to hire?
Yeah, it's gonna take some time. We're currently working on getting the software implemented, and we've started to move some of the assets from utilities into the system. So we hope that once everything is in there, there'll be some cleanup that's required. However, yes, it's going to take some time to get the information that we don't have on all the condition. We haven't looked at setting out a plan as to exactly how long it's going to take yet as we move along and look at the individual departments and work with the department managers. We'll come up with a more concrete plan going forward. So it will be a while before we see the full benefits of the software and the asset management program, but it's going to continually get better so that we will get to the point that Mr. Safino was talking about with having a 10-year sort of capital plan that will give us better data to work with.
Follow up, go ahead.
Okay, I'm just anticipating that there's going to be a staff impact there. That's the big one for me. And I'd welcome your input on that as well, Jim. My next question as well is we're presently involved in getting these things called master plans, sewer master plan, water master plan, et cetera. Would that no longer be necessary if we had an asset management plan?
Mr. Safino.
We would need master plans. The asset management would tell us where we're deficient, and the master plans would have to be ready so that we're ready to apply for grants. And that's a huge goal. And as far as staffing is concerned, it would depend on what the bottom line is for the infrastructure, that tells us to actually put it into the system. The less staff that you have, obviously, the longer it's going to take. The sooner that it's implemented, the more efficient we're going to be. But you enter the assets on a priority basis. Risk is number one. And the two biggest risks in any local government would be sewer and water. And then after that, you then bring it down to the lower risks. So if you do it right, hopefully you minimize the additional staff, but there's no guarantee that someone will come and ask for more staff.
Yeah. We'll see in the future. Director Holmes.
Just to address Director Taylor's staff concerns and cost concerns, I think it's in the news today that Summerland received $2 million to widen our spillway at Thirst Dam. If we didn't have our asset management plans in place, we wouldn't have got that money. It's as simple as that. So it's really important.
Yeah, it's a must-do situation if you want any grant funding in the future. Am I missing any hands? All right. Well, thanks for giving us the opportunity to ask the questions on that. Much appreciated, and we'll look forward to seeing what you come back to us with in the future. CAO report. Over to you.
I thought I'd just give the board an update on Eagle Bluff, Mr. Chair, just with more or less the numbers. I know there's been lots of information going out on it. And we also do need to ratify our declaration for a state of local emergency. And from what we understand from EMBC, or their new acronym, is that 2 days prior to the expiration of our 7-day state of local emergency declaration, we're supposed to ask for an extension. So we're going to do that today as well. So Danny has brought up an older version of that report. But this is what we'll be looking for, is the ratification of the declaration that you made on Saturday night. That by law can only be good for 7 days. So that would expire on the 5th. And we're going to be looking for an extension of those declarations for electoral areas A and B until August 12th. And then we have to submit those to the minister. So if we could get those on the floor, Mr. Chair, and then I'll just give the board a brief update prior to resolution.
Okay, so someone prepared to move the state of local emergency formalities, moved and seconded. Thank you. Any discussion on this? This is kind of a formality that we have to do. And this will include the August 5th to 12th as well, isn't that? So it's both
the extension
weeks of state of emergency. So just so everybody's aware of that. So call the question. All those in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? Motion carries. That part is taken care of.
Yeah, so Saturday night, apparently in the afternoon, it started getting windier, and then by Saturday night, the Eagle Bluff wildfire was blowing across the border from Washington State quite quickly, as the chair will evidence from his perch up on Anarchist Mountain. But as it did, we got activated, the town of Osoyoos got activated, and we were quickly, it was quickly recommended that we declare a state of local emergency, the town first, and then for areas A, B, and C. There was a little piece of C that got caught in the perimeter as well. So we were working on that Saturday night, and then quickly it became a conflagration and came very close to the town through an interface fire, and started moving up mostly in the Similkameen Valley for the regional district. So we were working closely with the town on that. BC Wildfire was already on it. They were starting to put resources on it. It was something where it was so visible overnight that people became very concerned about it. So the regional district has a response team on standby. So we were able to get our full emergency operations center up and running. Over the course of Saturday night and Sunday, we would have had probably 30 people, employees in the emergency operations center. The town of Osoyoos activated, and we were working closely with them. BC Wildfire was very good. They kept us in the loop. They've now transitioned to an incident management team and are working closely with their colleagues across the border. And once the incident management team comes in, they're self-sufficient, and they are now located in their camp at Keilgan Park in Okanagan Falls. So everything from the way it looked Saturday night to where we are now, everything worked very well. And just in the way that the wind blew the fire, I think and the way that the firefighters, both the wildfire, BC wildfire firefighters and the structure firefighters that responded immediately, it has gone very well. So initially, better safe than sorry. I mean, we always get our recommendations on perimeters from BC Wildfire. So the inner perimeter is where the orders are issued, and the outer perimeter is more the staging areas, the alert areas. So once we got the perimeters from BC Wildfire, we had on Saturday night 732 properties on order and 2,094 properties under alert, and that's what took up most of the night. As soon as you issue an order, then of course you need your state or local emergency, and that's when we start bringing in our agencies and support resources. So as soon as you issue an order to get people out of their houses, you need the emergency support services staff. A reception center was set up in Oliver to keep it out of the outer perimeter. Couldn't put it into a Soyuz because they were under order. So it was in Oliver. So the search, the ESS crews from Penticton and Oliver and Osoyoos opened up at the community center in one of the meeting rooms at the Oliver Parks and Recreation Center. And as of today, we had 261 persons registered, which is a small percentage of those that were under order or alert. And it's always difficult for us to reconcile why more people don't register, but nevertheless, it would seem that the ones that needed accommodation or food were the ones that registered, but most other people just took care of themselves and took off. But that's where we are today. Emergency Support Services always works with the ALERT, Animal Lifeline Rescue Society. So we had those on as well. So we had 5 cats, 5 horses, and 2 alpacas were all that we were able to move out of there. I think a lot of residents just stayed. So even in the order areas, I think a lot of the people were sticking by their house, and probably one of the concerns was taking care of their animals and making sure that structures were protected, which becomes a difficulty for those fighting the wildfire, not only from the prospect of does it disrupt response actions, but they need room to work. They need to get their hoses out across roads, and they need to get their trucks in there, and they need staging areas, and they've got all sorts of people from different departments that are still learning to communicate with one another, and it can become very dangerous. So even though the fire may have seemed a ways from some properties, it's the BC Wildfire getting set up in order to protect structures, getting their lines around structures and getting machinery in to try and get those breaks so that the fire doesn't spread. So a lot of progress has been made since Saturday night, but this is a huge fire, and it will take weeks, if not months, of active firefighting. And that's evidenced by the incident management team that comes in. They don't come in for a day. These responders are here now until they get control of that. So if you're still on your property and you're in an order area, we would certainly recommend that people leave so that proper response actions can be taken. The one thing that came out of the Caramaze Creek fire about this time last year, Mr. Chair, is we really wanted to promote the communication out of our Emergency Operations Center. And we have now sent out 1,611 notifications through Voyant. And we're always encouraging our citizens to sign up for that. And then we've also sent out a number of press releases, and working closely with the media, and also doing our video briefings on an annual basis, which Mayor McCardiff has been starring in over the last week or so. So lots of activity as far as that, and we've had lots of calls. The information section, which Mr. Thompson heads now, is also responsible for our call center. We've had 157 calls through the call center that have been actioned. And our finance section, which Mr. Safino heads, they've submitted 14 expense authorization forms for over $140,000 just in this short window. And and of course, with Mr. Safino, he's constantly checking on them with the MBC until we get them approved. So we go ahead, we spend the money, and then after this is all over, and the accountants and the lawyers come out, we submit our invoices, and they determine what they will pay you for. So the attention to detail as far as what you contract for, what you submit to EMB, to the pre-auc, is very important afterwards when we're trying to get our money back. We have had an average of over 25 employees in the EOC since Saturday night, and we're really pleased. On a Saturday evening in late July, early August, when you're looking for people on a moment's notice in order to come in on a weekend, often tough, but I know that both the town of Soya staff and the regional district staff were all on board and on duty. With that, we have an amazing network. So not only were we working closely with the town of Osoyoos, we worked with the town of Oliver as well. They opened up the community center for us for our reception center. And that's gone very well. We've now moved that back down to Osoyoos because they've reduced the perimeters on the town. So we're able to get it back in there. I believe it's at the Sun Bowl. It's at Sonora. Okay. Always we get great support from the Regional Operations Center up in Kamloops as far as us submitting our invoices and getting advice from them as well. The RCMP were first on board, and they did a tactical evacuation before, as we get our forms and signatures and approvals for an order or an alert. The RCMP and the search and rescue are out in the front line, moving people out of harm's way. So they did a great job on that. And Andrew Bayless is the one that is with us in our EOC, and he always gives us good information, and we appreciate that as well. So we had the Provincial Health Authority in the EOC. There were some vulnerable people that were affected by not only in the order areas, but also by the smoke that were moved out. And that's always a tough job. So this emergency management for IH was very good. I've heard the numbers of how many structure firefighters have been attending from around the valley. I know as far north as West Kelowna, they've been assembling and working, and with volunteer departments, you have to be cautious that you leave enough resources back at their home departments in order to fight any fires that stem up in their own areas. But it's probably 70 or 80 structure firefighters working with the incident management team to protect homes around Osoyoos, and all of our departments, or the majority of them, were involved. And then other than that, it's really about just trying to coordinate an effort and making sure that those on duty and coming in and out of an emergency operations center know fully what their jobs are and getting the job done. So all going well, Mr. Chair. And other than that, if there are any questions, I'd be happy to try and answer those.
Okay, I'll just check if there's any questions. Go ahead, Director McCordoff.
I just want to say that as far as I know, there have been no structures lost in this fire, which is pretty amazing, because if one of the houses up at Dividend Ridge had caught on fire, it could have wiped out the whole group of them. So that's thanks to all the tactical teams and that were up there. All the fire departments, I couldn't remember them all, but I know that Eric mentioned them yesterday. I think there was 8 or 10 from around our local area, plus the United States group. So it's phenomenal how well it works when they're prepared and they're ready, and they were.
Yeah. I would just add that the evacuation was complicated a little bit by the fact that behind the golf course subdivision where the fire was coming down towards the homes, there was a bunch of people that camp up there all the time, and getting them out of there was a bit of a challenge, or just getting them notice that they had to evacuate. So it worked, but there was one truck who I could see from my place. The flames were on all sides as that person was driving out. So it was close, and it was a little bit spooky to see the headlights coming out of there, and you're going, uh-oh.
So the RCMP mentioned that there was a tent that was up there, fire all around it, and there was a guy wire from the top of the tent that was plugged, into the ground. Fire all around it, but the tent wire is still there, wasn't burned. So they can't figure out why, but they were all saved up there too. Yeah, thank heavens.
They all got out and nothing was lost. So Director Fedrigo, and then.
Yep. So my husband responded on Saturday night. And so one of the big things that they were tasked with doing, which saved a lot of the houses, was fire smarting. So they were up there and they were told what they were doing was fire smarting properties. So do not take fire smarting lightly. When they respond, that is what they do. So a lot of it was just moving wood piles away from houses, as small as pulling your carpet off of your deck or your front entrance, because those catch on fire. So pay attention to fire smarting, fire smart your property. It can save your property.
Yeah, very, very true. Go ahead.
Thank you. Just a couple of things. So along that line, there's a really great article.
Oh, Mike. Yep.
I'm not here enough. I'm new here. Our microphones in Oliver are automatic. No, there was a really great article that I read today or yesterday in the Times Chronicle, an interview with the fire chief in Asuias, and talking just to Mr. Newell's point about people staying behind, the emotional toll on the firefighters, even just knowing that there's people in the homes behind them, as opposed to it just being a structure. So I know that none of us here were evacuated or on notice, but that's just, you are on alert. Just so important to get that message out, because it was really impactful to read from the fire chief. My question, though, I have a question about the Voyant alert system. How does it work exactly? Because very coincidentally, I received a Voyant alert notice while we're sitting here today about the ESS center in, I think that's what it's about. I didn't actually read it, but it was an update to the fire. But that's the only one that I've received personally in this couple of day period. But I don't live in the zone, so I don't know. Are they targeted? The alerts targeted specific to specific areas, and then why would I have received one today if I didn't receive one before?
Yeah, they are targeted. You may have received it because I don't know, but. Because I didn't read your alert either, but it may have been because the reception center was moving from Oliver to the site.
Maybe.
But yes, you have to sign up for it to get one, and then you can pick and choose which activities you want to get an alert on. So if you've picked emergencies, then you may have got that, or it could have been something else.
Yeah, weird. Yeah, it just says RDOS Emergency Operations Center 2023 wildfire update, and then gives all of the information. Anyways.
Go ahead.
Did you get one?
Just to clarify.
Oh, maybe because I'm
Sorry,
here.
go ahead.
No, they said maybe because I'm here and it tagged me as being a different
So
location.
when you sign up, you pinpoint where your location is. And yes, sometimes it can pick you up with that as well, the location of where you are. But I think it's important to note that the minute you go into Voyant Alert to sign up for anything, it will always then register you for emergencies. So it'll always do emergencies, and if you pick other things as well, it will do those. But nobody can escape the emergency one. Once they sign up for it, once they go into Voyant Alert, they're automatically flagged for that. So there's a couple of different ways you might receive one. Also, Oliver has Voyant Alert, or is starting to, I believe. I'll have to double check with Rochelle on that, but I think that's a system that may be underway there too.
Okay, yeah, that's what I thought. That's why I just thought it was curious that I received one today, but that was it. Anyways.
Director Taylor?
Yeah, just to reflect experience of a neighboring director. Got calls on Sunday morning regarding use of the park and stuff like that for wildfire fighters and the incident management team. So that was great. Monday, I got a very quick nose in, look around, tour of your EOC. You hear that guys have been on there, I think, 24-hour full cycle. Some of them were there for a long time at any event. I really thought that the daily hosting of EOC briefings, don't know if you've been doing that in the past, but I really like the regular time, daily, professionally hosted briefing. And if you want that information, you can listen, or you can play it back afterwards at 1.5 times and listen to the squirrels, and it's it's effective. So from my perspective, I thought, just from my sort of interaction with it, I thought EOC was doing a good job and staff were doing a good job of providing support to the incident. And I think that's their primary role. And so I was pleased to see that. I do think it'd be helpful. They certainly have permission to have my home cell number because, I missed the call. It was on my RDOS phone, and Sunday morning, like, I don't know if I'm supposed to have that with me 24/7, but if you want to reach me, you can use my own cell number on a weekend or evening.
Okay, thanks for that. Any questions or other comments? Director Roberts, go ahead.
Thank you. And to follow up for Director Taylor, I've made sure, because again, I keep my RDOS phone in my office and check it regularly so I can follow up on messages. But when staff get a hold of me, I've told them, this is the phone, this is the one I carry. I don't carry the other one. So you might find that helpful. I'd also like to make a statement, again, we've, everybody doing such a good job and everybody working together. And I think it's also for us to be aware that a lot of our departments, like I know Karamias, at the same time is in 3 different locations, as well as covering their own community. We had 15 to 16 firefighters in the Karamias Regional District Fire Hall, looking after our area. And then we had 4 up working on the Soils fire. We had 3 that were doing a switchover with another 3 from Sparwood dealing without the Kootenays, and then a group of 3 up north. So a lot of times these firefighters from our different communities, not only in this emergency, they've been asked, because we work so well now together, and all these groups are become, the volunteer fire departments as well as our municipal ones are sending teams throughout the province. So a lot of times it's not just that they're working amazingly hard in our backyard. They may have just come back from fighting fire in some other district. So I think it's just kudos to all of them, and then just that they stay safe, and us to be aware of the sacrifices that these people make. This year with forest fires across Canada, we've lost more wildfire people than I believe we have, if ever, because I know 3 for sure. So anyways, it's just important for us to be aware, and especially with the new reality, this is yearly. Thanks.
Okay. All right, seeing no more hands, we'll move on. Other business, chair's report. I think it's mostly been covered as far as what I've been dealing with just lately. I would just add that those, I think they're almost every couple of weeks we get them updates or provincial ministers' conference calls or online things. Those are still ongoing and somewhat useful, but the last couple of times I've been unable to log in for whatever reason. So I had to phone in one time when it was supposed to be the other way. But irregardless, I try to tune in to all of those when they're not on a board day, just so everybody is aware. Sometimes you won't see me if I'm on the phone, but the list is long of how many people are actually attending them. There's like hundreds. So that is always on the go. Moving on here, director's motions. There was one motion from a hand from, I'm going to go first to Director Roberts and then I'll come to you, Director Knodel. Go ahead, Director Roberts.
Or I think, I'm not sure, is it people that are making motions first, or is it?
Well, this was a motion that you'd given us notice of last week, so it's yours that we do have on our agenda.
Unfortunately, you've already had to listen to me for a while, so here we go. If I'm allowed, I'd like to speak to it right after I do it, and then open.
Well, let's get it on the floor first. If you move the motion you're after, and tell us what it is.
All right, so the motion is, whereas a motion was approved in 2019 to research land and the needs for the Karamias Regional District Fire Hall, and whereas the fire underwriters produced a report to the Karamias and District Fire Hall regarding required adjustments, therefore the RDOS to start the process to proceed towards the research of setting up either a new fire hall meeting the needs of what are necessary in Karamias and District Fire Hall, and all that is needed regards to setting up the framework to take it to the public.
Okay, so that's the motion you're making. Is there someone willing to second that? It's on the floor, it's seconded. So you wanted to discuss or to address it? Go ahead, Dr. Roberts.
If I could just give a little framework. So again, when we initially brought this up in 2019, it was background was that I was asked to do an HRVA, or the hazards risk vulnerability assessment for BC Ambulance. And a lot of this stuff, I was also dealing with discussions with the fire department, because at the same time I was a member. And, we came across these requirements of WorkSafe BC. And then, so as that's gone by, and then now we did receive something from the fire underwriters, and they highlighted at least 3 requirements that we are not compliant about, which we haven't been for a while, and which were a part of our initial discussion. 31.32 vehicle exhaust in the fire halls, 4.86 in regards to changing areas, and 5.48, which ties into both of those because it's all about exposure limits in regards to particulate matters and prions, etc. When we bring that up, that is tied to that there, and that is specifically what the fire underwriters are in these 3 items are specific to WorkSafe BC requirements, not just suggestions or a grading. And then we also recently have the Health and Safety Regional District individual that's doing an inspection either today or tomorrow. And again, that's to protect us from having a inspection coming in from, let's say, WorkSafe BC and then being found in arrears. Because when I originally had to do this for BC Ambulance, it's because we ended up having to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars in fines for being lackadaisical for so many years. And that all came, and now we're a lot more in tune with what our requirements are and how we keep up with them. So in regards to that, we've looked at, with the chief, they've done a recent land survey in regards to the parameters of the hall. Necessary issues in regards to the building and how it can or cannot meet the positive pressure requirements with HVAC systems. And there's reasons why. That's something that gets later in when they're doing their researching. But I just wanted to make sure everybody was aware of that. It wasn't just a spur of the moment thought. So anyways, thanks.
Okay, I have a hand from Director Monteith. Go ahead.
And through the chair, I guess I just want to share that Caledon's in the exact same position. You know, we need to do an upgrade with our fire hall, but we're dealing with it within our budget. I guess I'm curious to why we need a director's motion, because you have a budget, you have a service. I guess I'm feeling lost.
The first complicating factor is there's Area B, Area G, and the town of, or village of Keremeus. It's owned by the regional district, but there's 3 separate groups paying, and it just complicates it. So they all got to be on the same page to get where they need to go. So maybe Director Roberts wants to add more to that, or someone, but you had follow-up?
Yeah, just to comment that if I was in a service that was shared, I'd be wanting to sort that out, I guess, versus it come to the board and have us do it. Like, I feel uncomfortable making a decision for another service that I'm not paying for. So I feel uncomfortable.
Okay, did I see a hand from you, Director Bush? Go ahead.
Yeah, I don't know where to start. We need to get the fire department out of the floodplain eventually. And I think we budgeted something like $30,000 to look at it. We haven't gone there yet because I know we've never had the money to do it yet. But now that we have, I think between Area G and B, we have like $1 million that we're allowed to spend on something like this. So we're looking at starting the process. We want to at least find some land. I don't think a fire hall building is going to be in the next few years, but we need to start the discussion. And that's all this is. Thanks.
Okay. Director Roberts, and then over to Director Holmes.
Yeah, and historically, this is what we were told to do, and this is why we had a motion earlier, because at the same time, this is the staff, the fire chief and the firefighters are regional district employees, whether or not on call or not. This fits under health and safety and the requirements, and the board as a whole, if these requirements are met. So we're not talking about whether or not we have a fancy piece of equipment here or we've decided to do that. We're talking about health and safety and provincial requirements that actually put the board possibly in a libelous situation if we don't. I don't believe it would be just BG and the village that would be liable. It would be the regional district, because it is a regional district building and these are regional district staff.
I seen Director Holmes and then over to Director Wiebe.
Just a question to Director Roberts, just to clarify in the motion to take it to the public. Maybe you mentioned that I missed it, but what does that mean? To just have public engagement, or is that a commitment to go to referendum, or what is? If you could just clarify that, please.
Director Roberts.
Thanks. Again, it's just part of the whole process. Like we're looking for the public to be aware of the discussion. And then we talked about whether or not it would end, because any decision, whether or not it's just repairing and seeing it's going to be hundreds of thousands of dollars and we don't have the land, if we're fixing the one we have and also having additional site, it'll end up having to be taken to referendum. If we replace the fire hall, it'll have to go to referendum. If we purchase a property, it'll have to go to referendum. So we're wanting to have all the assessments and the research done in ahead of time to make sure that we've crossed our T's. We're not, none of us are out here wanting to spend money. We want to protect our citizens, but we also want to be fiscally responsible. But the same idea, part of that fiscal responsibility is making sure we meet all our requirements that don't put us into a libelous situation as a board. So that's why that was tagged in. It may be superfluous, but that was kind of the idea behind that originally. And that was what was stated in the first motion in 2019.
Okay, Director Wiebe.
Not everybody has $1 million they're trying to find use for, okay? the BC Growing Community Fund has a lot of places that it can go. And so identifying as a village where that should best be spent. The upside to actually dealing with dikes that cause floods is that you don't have to relocate buildings. And that hasn't been part of the dialogue at all. So there's $1 million apparently that is looking for a home, but it could find one. We've already identified where it is. Our engineers have already gone through that process. The difficulty with this is the wording of it, and it was kind of alluded to, is the setting up the framework to take it to the public. I'd be willing to make a friendly amendment that we research usable and available land, identify and document current deficiencies, and verify the potential need of a new fire hall or relocation. What it needs to be this, because we still don't, like, we're being asked on a motion today that we have no documentation. I asked nearly 2 weeks ago that the documentation be given that has been cited, but it hasn't been brought to this table. So ultimately, this board is being asked to make a decision based on incomplete information. And it definitely doesn't have unanimous support from the 3 partners who are at the table paying for it. Because you're talking about the potential of millions of dollars without any real dialogue of how we're going to pay for it yet. And you can say, we'll borrow, but we've borrowed for fire trucks, we've borrowed for irrigation. We're still paying for what we call the tower in Karamias. So these are some of the issues that I have. So I'm willing to clearly articulate what was given in 2019. That seems like there wasn't much forward made on it. But as it currently sits, no, I wouldn't be in favor of this.
Okay. Director Roberts.
First off, I would say I have no problem with the wording that Director Weeb has stated. The other thing being that the difference between the dike and the fire hall, especially the dike issues that are above Karamias, which are in Area G, we don't have the mitigation bylaw or the ability to maintain. So it'd be one thing to fix it initially in certain spots, but then we would take on the responsibility and the liability of the dike from here on in. So that was part of the concerns about that. The fire hall piece, again, like the wording, I don't really have a problem with that wording there. And again, we're not talking about building the fire hall right now and spending millions. We're talking about the money that it takes to cover the assessments of the budget. So for instance, it would be the, those types of costs. Again, Director Bush had stated the 30,000 that we put across, those we're not talking about multiple millions. And again, we want to know where we stand and what are the specifics. And just to be aware that the documents that Director Weeb is stating was sent to him in December, and then was then again mentioned to the fire chief to make sure that if the village of Karamias needed it, that to make it available. And these are things that were written specifically in those articles and that were sent to the 3 of us directors. So just to be clear on that. So again, the friendly amendment, I think, is justifiable, because even reading it, I had started to change a couple things. Again, to make it palatable, it was lost in my, as a lot of people have noticed, a lot of things was lost in my junk mail. Okay.
I'm going to have to ask Ms. Molden if we can do a friendly amendment such as that. That one seems to be a significant change, in my opinion, but I'm going to ask. Go ahead.
That would be a significant departure from the original one. That wouldn't meet the needs of an amendment.
Okay, so the cleanest way to deal with that then would be to dispose of the first motion that's already on the floor. So it would be, if you want to go the route that Director Weeb suggested, it would be defeat the first motion and make a new one. So just so everybody's clear on that. If we don't want to go that way and want to follow the first one, obviously you approve it. But any further discussion on this motion that we do have on the floor at the moment? Seeing no hands, go ahead. Director Ventimille?
Not on the motion, just on the process, because I don't know much about the mechanics of notice of motion. So if this one's defeated, does the next motion become another notice of motion, or it just goes right on the table?
That's not one we've dealt with that I can recall, but good question. Ms. Molden?
I would say that as the board is in the discussion and committed to the discussion on this today, it would probably be okay to consider that additional motion.
Okay. So there you have it. You always question and made me think for a minute, like, uh-oh. It's not a bad thing. We'll call the question on the motion as it reads then at the moment. Does anybody need it read out? Director Taylor?
Actually, I'm just wondering how Director Roberts feels about seeing his motion voted down in favor of an amendment.
Well, I won't speak for him, so Director Roberts.
I thought it was fair.
Okay, so he's okay with it, is what he's saying, as long as there's another motion made. So, yeah, everybody's ready to vote here. So all those in favor of the motion as it was presented? Opposed? Okay, that motion is defeated. Thank you. And the new motion, Mr. Wiebe is probably ready to move it. Do we want it read? Ms. Molden, could you read it just so that the board has it?
Sure. So there was 3 parts to this that research number 1.1 that land, available and usable land be researched, that the board identify current, I didn't have that second word, current
Deficiencies, probably.
deficiencies, yeah, thank you, and verify the need for potential new location of the fire hall.
Okay. So it's moved. Is there a seconder for that? Director Bush is seconding it? Get a tongue twister here. Any discussion on this? We all know where it's headed or what the intent is, so I will call the question. All those in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? Motion carries. Over to Director Knodel. You had a notice of motion or a motion you were proposing?
Yes, sir. I have a potential member of my APC who was left off the consent agenda. I was told I might be able to bring it through rather than have him wait for another 2 weeks. So I'd like to make a motion to bring that forward now.
Okay, so this would be to place someone on your APC?
That's correct, yeah.
Okay, do we have the name?
Norm Gaumont.
Norm Gaumont, okay. So you're moving to add Norm Gaumont to your APC. Now, before we get there, I think we need to, if we're going to deal with it today, we need a motion from the board to approve dealing with it today. So that would be the first motion. Moved, seconded, thank you. All those in favor? Great. Any opposed? All right. So the motion that you're making is to, well, not amend, add Norm Gaumont to your APC.
Correct.
Okay, is there a seconder for that? Seconded, it's on the floor. Any discussion needed? Seeing no hands, again, corporate, all those in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? That carries. Any other director's motions? Not seeing any hands. So we move to board members' verbal updates. Anything happening in your community or neighborhood that you're wanting to let the board be aware of? I think we've had a detailed update as to what's going on in the south, so we won't belabor that. Seeing nothing there. The next section we go into is G, which is a closed session for receipt of closed minutes. So in accordance with section 90, I gotta 1A and 91C and 91D of the Community Charter, the board closed the meeting to the public on the basis of personal information about an identifiable individual who holds or is being considered for a position as an officer, employee, or agent of the regional district, or another position appointed by the regional district, labor relations or other employee relations, and the security of the regional district. So that's the grounds we're going in closed on. So looking for a motion to go in camera. Moved, seconded, thank you. All those in favor? Great. Any opposed? Just give Danny a moment to put us into closed. Yeah.
Highway 3 is closed between the cities and Jeremy right now.
Did you get a buoyant alert to
No, I just got it.
They sent something out to her. We back in? Got the thumbs up? Okay. So we're out of closed. We don't have anything yet, items coming out, so we're just for a motion to adjourn. Moved, seconded, thank you. All those in favor? Perfect. Any opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you for your patience, and we will see everybody at the next meeting.
I didn't take you minutes. I probably should have, but that's
No.
what you said you were going to do for the next meeting.
Oh, perfect. I've got it.
I don't remember things like that. I just